Chapter 101, Gorilla Transformation Problem. Just cut off the tail. Kasha's eyes widened, and she stared at Axis in disbelief, as if she'd just heard the most outrageous thing. Then she burst into laughter and rolled on the bed. Axis, that little scoundrel, had actually dared to give his father a nickname. She'd thought calling Magnus Magic Pony had been bold, but she never expected something like Huang Lao Han to exist. Ah, that's priceless. It's as funny as your Magic Pony nickname. But don't let any of the other Gene Seed Primarchs hear it, or you'll be in trouble, Kasha said, clutching her stomach. Being with Axis always put her at ease. He was nothing like the other solemn Imperial Lords. It's just a nickname. What's the harm? And even if the Gene Seed Primarchs found out, who could touch me? All of them combined I could handle with one hand, Axis replied with a grin. Unless he awakened his warp essence, Gene Seed Primarchs posed little real threat to him. After mastering the Super Saiyan transformation in its base form, his strength had risen 50-fold. With that power, Axis felt justified in underestimating most opponents. What a terrifying race the Saiyans were. Don't get cocky. Gene Seed Primarchs aren't just physical anomalies. They have warp essence, Kasha warned. Still, Axis did have reason to be confident. Enough jokes, she added, kneeling on the bed. Are you actually going to do anything about your Gene Seed problem? This is an Astartes Legion we're talking about. The status of a Gene Seed Primarch and Axis's current position as a Wolf Lord were not equivalent. Becoming a Gene Seed Primarch meant entering the true high circles of the Imperium, right under the Emperor. Axis's combat power was enough to make him one of the strongest humans aside from the Emperor, but without a compatible Astartes Legion, his Primarch identity wouldn't be recognized. At best, he'd be treated like an honored consort. My Gene Seed requires Ki to stay viable, Axis explained. The best approach is to create special cultivators. When the Astartes are modified, the Gene Seed would be nourished by Ki during implantation. If the Saiyan cells receive Ki then, the Gene Seed could store part of that Ki, and the Astartes could survive without relying on an external Ki supply. The deaths and exhaustion had happened because Saiyan cells didn't get the nourishing Ki. If the Gene Seed could be implanted while fed by Ki, it might stabilize and let its recipients live normal lives. They still might not be able to use Ki themselves, but at least they wouldn't be dying. As for cultivators, Kasha said, you should find a right moment to bring this up with Father. I will. It'll need to be at a very special moment, Axis said. Even if the Saiyan Legion only benefited from raw physical power, it would be terrifying. And the Great Ape transformation? Kasha asked. If they have my Ki during the process, they shouldn't die from the transformation. Controlling it is another matter. I haven't fully solved that myself, let alone trained an entire legion, Axis said. But there is one crude solution. Cut off their tails. To prevent a Saiyan's Great Ape change, a blunt but effective method existed. Remove the tail. The Astartes grown from his Gene Seed would also develop tails. Otherwise, they couldn't absorb the Blutz waves and transform. Simply removing the tails would prevent the transformation. That actually solves it, Kasha said, relieved. The Imperium's problems often came down to poor communication. If Father had explained things to Axis long ago, many issues might have been avoided. It was like with Mother. If the Emperor had been forthcoming about the warp, she might have acted differently. A simple clarification could have prevented so much. Once we deal with the Raiden, when your father summons me, I'll find a way to speak with him, Axis said. Russ himself had known that his tail was a vulnerability during his Great Ape phase. Axis had mentioned the tail's weakness before. The Emperor ought to have learned from Russ. But Huang Lao Han could be mysterious and guarded, perpetually on alert, and that secrecy sometimes created problems. To deal with the Raiden, are you planning to reveal your Super Saiyan form? Kasha asked. The legendary Super Saiyan is out of the question, of course. I might show a mimetic transformation or a partial Super Saiyan manifestation. Most ordinary people wouldn't notice a difference. In a last resort, I can become a normal Super Saiyan, Axis said. He believed no one in the real universe could force him to reveal his full transformation. Even a standard Super Saiyan wouldn't be easily compelled. And secrecy was helped by the fact that the Emperor had sent the First Legion, who kept tight counsel. If Axis simply told Lion L. Johnson it was the Emperor's will and an Imperial secret, Lion would not press. The Dark Angels were excellent at covering things up. Axis, Chancellor Micardo taught you for many years. You two are close, right? Maybe you should explain this to him. Micardo and Father are close, Kasha suggested. Only you, Russ, Magnus, and Mater know I awakened psychic power. Chancellor Micardo doesn't. How could I possibly tell him? Axis answered. Telling Micardo about his psychic awakening would be tantamount to telling the Emperor. Fine, your legion doesn't have to be formed immediately. Let's take it step by step, Kasha said. She'd intended to pass the information discreetly, but if she spoke now, the Emperor might immediately learn she'd warned Axis, and then what would Father think? Better to wait for the right moment. Get some rest, Axis said, lying down beside her. Kasha answered. They spent the night in silence. The next day, Leman Russ gathered the Space Wolves' fleets and they entered the warp together, heading toward the Raiden. On Holy Terra, after the Emperor finished speaking with Kasha, he summoned the first Gene Seed Primarch, Lion L. Johnson. A broad-shouldered man in green power armor with thick blonde hair entered and then knelt before the Emperor. Father, my Gene Seed offspring are ready. The Dark Angels stand ready to fight and eliminate the Imperium's enemies, Lion declared. Lion L. Johnson, the Emperor said, in addition to dealing with the Raiden, I have another task. I will assign a new Gloriana-class battleship from Mars to you. You must take that Gloriana to the Space Wolves and deliver it to their 14th Company Captain, Axis. That ship will be his. Father? Why give a Gloriana-class battleship to a Space Wolves captain? Lion asked, puzzled. A Gloriana was standard issue for a Primarch. It made no sense to hand such a vessel to an ordinary captain, unless there was more to this. Because he is one of your brothers, and he is also a Gene Seed Primarch, the Emperor replied. What, Father, if he is a Primarch, why is he with Russ? Lion pressed. His Gene Seed has some defects, so his Astartes Legion has not yet been formed. That's why I had him remain with Russ. Russ and he himself do not yet know his true identity, the Emperor said. Does this brother have defects? Lion asked, alarmed. Was the Emperor sending him to test or to eliminate this brother? Bringing a Gloriana didn't make sense if the intention was elimination. He is different from you, the Emperor said. This time I want you to test him, test his strength. After you engage him, you may reveal some information to him and question him about the Great Ape transformation and key. Above all, ensure that Axis's key power does not leak out. Yes, Father, Lion agreed. Chapter 1 or 2, Lion King Leon, Gloriana-class battleship. Travel through the warp was mind-numbingly dull. Axis filled his days aboard ship with training, refining his ki and practicing control over his psychic power. He would sometimes go to his cabin to drill Kasha or play tower defense games with her. Axis, when you meet Lion and the others, show them the key. I promise my father knows that power, but you must never reveal your psychic power. Hide it, Kasha told him. I know, Axis replied. My psychic power is under strict control. Unless I want it exposed, no one will know. His nominal father, Leman Russ, also had psychic power and had taught Axis how to conceal it. Russ was the most skilled at disguise among the Gene Seed Primarchs. He could hide himself completely. He'd given Axis practical advice on how to mask his presence, even when a loud, blustering disguise sometimes worked better at winning people's favor. Kasha also warned about the Legion's intellect library. You should tell Russ in advance. Those rune priests must not be exposed to the 1st and 5th Legions. Axis trusted Russ to handle it. Russ would conceal what needed hiding. More than 2 months later, Axis and his fleet arrived in the eastern reaches of the Imperium, the system where Axis had first been deployed years earlier. Back then, he'd struck across a hemisphere, annihilating tens of thousands of Astartes on a single planet. Over the decades since, Axis's control of ki had only improved. If he chose to, in his Super Saiyan-like transformation, he could target every living thing on a planet and cleanse it in a single strike. A fleet waited in that familiar but strange system, the Dark Angels. This time, the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels would lead the frontal assault. The White Scars under Jagatai Khan were deployed in another system, providing fire support and logistics. Whatever threat they were facing, it had to be severe for the Imperium to mobilize both the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves together. the two sharpest fighting legions in the Great Crusade. The Dark Angels' forces were immense, reportedly 200,000 strong, far larger than the Space Wolves' contingent of just over 70,000, and included many mortal auxiliaries. When the Dark Angels detected Russ's legion tearing through a warp rift, they sent a psychic summons requesting Leman Russ, Lord of the 6th, and Axis, captain of the 14th Company, come aboard Lion L. Johnson's flagship, the Unwavering Truth. Russ replied immediately by psychic communication. Axis didn't bring Kasha. He went first to Russ's flagship. From there, he and Russ took a small craft to the Dark Angels' command ship. A Dark Angels captain met them as they boarded. "Welcome. Lord Lion has been waiting. Please follow me," the captain said. They walked down long corridors to the command bridge. There, in the hall, stood a tall, pale man in green power armor, blonde hair, and an almost predatory bearing. Russ spread his arms. "Long time no see, Lion. I didn't expect us to be fighting side by side," he greeted warmly, moving to embrace the Primarch. Lionel Johnson made no sound. He only inclined his head slightly and held his distance, offering no embrace. He seemed cold, unreadable. Russ felt the awkwardness. Among the Primarchs, he was never comfortable with Lion. The man carried a barely suppressed savagery. "Our mission is critical," Lion said. "This is the front line. We face an alien race that is a terrible threat to the Imperium. Do not hold back, Russ. This battle will be hard." Russ looked at the numbers. His Space Wolves had only a little over 70,000, while the Dark Angels numbered well over 200,000. The 5th Legion had only tens of thousands. The principal striking force was plainly the Dark Angels. "Don't worry, Lion," Russ said. "We will win. The Emperor sent Axis for a reason." He believed that if the Emperor had entrusted this secret weapon, no foe was beyond them. Axis's reputation for rapid conquest, his practice of offering surrender, and failing that, punishing resistance with overwhelming force, was well known. Before each engagement, Axis would give the enemy a chance to capitulate, surrender, and keep life and a measure of autonomy in exchange for joining the crusade and paying tithes. Refuse, and Axis's methods were brutal. Leadership executed regardless of age or gender. If citizen resistance caused mortal casualties, planetary soldiers might be summarily killed. If space marines were lost to stubborn defense, he would reduce the world to ruin. In the Imperium's calculus, human life could be replaced with colonies in time. Axis's shock and awe approach usually made whole populations choose surrender. Axis's power came mainly from Ki, a physical cosmic energy, not warp-based. It was devastatingly destructive, enhanced his strength and speed, and enabled flight. The Imperium had only fragmentary records of his battles. On one mission, he and Russ went alone, and within a day, destroyed tens of thousands of 2nd Legion fighters and captured the 2nd Primarch, saving him and allowing that legion to be rebuilt. That mission had persuaded the Emperor of Axis's value. Lion turned to Axis. "Arrogance is not a virtue, brother. Still, the Emperor has granted a Gloriana-class battleship. It will be given to your most capable subordinate, Captain Axis of the 14th Company. This Gloriana is an imperial reward to you." Axis smiled. Up close, he looked small for a Primarch, only about 2.1 to 2.2 meters tall, perhaps 2.4 in power armor. The Primarchs were supposed to be giants, routinely well over 3.5 meters. Russ, Horus, and the others were close to 3.8 meters. Vulcan exceeded 4. Axis's comparatively modest stature made some question how he could be as potent as the Emperor claimed. But Lion had received reports. Axis had been first raised by Russ, later discovered by the Emperor, taken to Terra for custodian surgeries that were effectively Primarch modifications, except they weren't derived from the Emperor's own gene seed. Lion and the others did not yet understand the Primarch's warp nature. Russ clapped Axis on the shoulder. "The honor is yours," Axis said. "I didn't expect the Emperor to grant you a Gloriana," Russ laughed. "Now our Space Wolves effectively have 2. This will be useful." Lion explained the ship's complement. The Gloriana carries a massive arsenal, 200,000 naval personnel plus over 300,000 sailors, a senior navigator, 3 psychic communicators, and 4 escort frigates. Use it well. "I will, Lord Lion," Axis answered. "When do we depart to deal with the Raiden?" Lion pointed to the tactical display. "We have detected enemy movements. Their fleet strength rivals ours. This will be a difficult space engagement. Axis's plan was blunt. Simple: expose the position of our main fleet, lure them in, and then annihilate them. Once they're in system with us, their fate is decided. Lion, cautious, favored concealment and a rear ambush. Our numbers are about half theirs. I intended to hide and strike opportunistically. Russ laughed. My brother, father sent you, and he sent Axis so you could understand Axis's power. If their fleet dares to show itself, the Raiden will be finished. Lion added, Axis, come with me to the training room. I want to see your strength. Russ coughed twice, cutting the air and shooting a warning glance at Lion. Having been with Axis long enough, he knew how terrifying the boy's abilities really were, and how risky it might be to provoke or parade them. Chapter 103. Crazy, how many of you are there? Come on, let's go together. How terrifying was Axis now? He could effortlessly obliterate planets, move through sky and earth as if they were nothing, shatter a mountain with a single blow, blast a continent with another, shifting tectonic plates. A casual stomp from him could trigger a planet-wide quake. What kind of power was that? In Russ's estimation, among all of humanity, only the Emperor might be able to hold Axis at bay. And without psychic power, even the Emperor might not be able to defeat him. I know what I'm doing. I won't hurt Axis. I'm only sparring, stopping before it gets serious, Lionel Johnson said. As the most formidable of the Gene Seed Primarchs, the Lion spoke with absolute confidence. Outside the Lord of Mankind himself, no human rivaled his might. Not even Horus or Sanguinius among the Primarchs could match him. Learning that Axis was also a Gene Seed Primarch, an engine of war personally cultivated by the Emperor, he intended to test this brother. And since their Gene Father had commanded it, he could not refuse. Lion King, I'm not worried about Axis. I'm worried about you. Russ shook his head. It sounded harsh, but he had to make himself clear. Otherwise, his nominal elder brother might go in too far and not come back the same. Lionel Johnson frowned, golden hair falling like a proud mane, eyes flashing. Russ, how much do you think you know of my strength? Lion said. I don't know how strong you are, Russ replied, but trust me, this is for your own good. He truly did not know Lion's limits, but he knew Axis's. Axis crossed his arms and watched the exchange with mild amusement. Had the Lion learned anything from the Emperor's example, hurting a fellow Primarch to test him? That would be amusing. Should he hold back? Asking a Saiyan to hold back was almost comical. Before Axis could decide, the Dark Angels around him reacted. Their Gene Father, the great Lionel Johnson, was about to challenge a mortal. No matter how many gene seeds adorned him, a Space Marine was still immortal. And the 6th Primarch had the nerve to say their Gene Father might be in danger? Outrage flared. Great Lion King, great Gene Father, allow me to challenge Captain Axis. There's no need for you to get involved. One Dark Angel stepped forward. Let me go, others called, several pressing forward as if Axis were the accused and Lion the defendant. Axis shrugged. Fine. If these little nobles wanted to throw themselves at him, he wouldn't hold back. If he left them maimed, couldn't blame him. Killing them outright was unlikely, but whether any would need to be placed in a dreadnought, who could say? Stop this, Russ roared. You fools have no idea what Axis can do. The gulf between a Space Marine and Axis was abyssal. To Axis, even a battle brother could be dispatched with a single blow. Russ's shout made some of the Dark Angels stagger. He was truly angry now. Primarch, my Gene Seed offspring. Lion cut in, stepping in front of Russ. It is not for you to lecture, Russ, and this duel is not ours to decide. He spoke the Emperor's command, orders he must obey. The Lion and the Wolf stood opposed. Russ stared at Lion in shock, then realization. This duel was not theirs to cancel. In other words, the Emperor had arranged it. Why would their Gene Father set up such a lopsided fight? If your sons wish to test me, fine, Axis said. But I'm in a hurry. Let them all come at once. Anyone who doubts me, send them. Presumptuous. Kneel before a Primarch, a Dark Angel sneered, stepping forward and trying to force Axis to his knees, hands on his shoulders. He pressed with all his strength, the force enough to crumple power armor, but Axis stood like an iron pillar. He did not budge. Another Dark Angel placed his hands on Axis's other shoulder. Together they pushed with a force that would have toppled lesser men. Still nothing. Then the two realized. Axis wasn't wearing power armor. He wore only a tight inner suit. A space marine out of his armor was far weaker. The difference could be tenfold. Have you two been eating? Or are you women in disguise? Axis sneered. Why are you so weak? Fury replaced shame. Almost in unison, they lashed out at Axis's knees, aiming to knock him over. There was a dull crunch as their leg armor deformed, an impact reverberating up their spines. Both men staggered. First time, I let you. That's the courtesy of the Space Wolves, Axis said. Second time, out of respect for your gene father. Third time, don't blame me when I stop being polite. He snorted, and a terrifying pressure rolled out from his back. The two Dark Angels catapulted backward, crashed into the wall, and became embedded in it. Axis hadn't even moved. Only the shockwave from his aura had done the work. The surrounding Dark Angels watched, stunned, at a man without power armor with such strength. Russ stood back, letting Lion truly see what he faced. Don't say I'm bullying you. Bring everyone, however many there are. If any of you can make me take even one step, you win, Axis said, voice cool and commanding. Those words ignited the Dark Angels' pride. Two of their brothers had been humiliated. They would not accept it. Bastard, don't get cocky. We'll show you the might of the First Legion, one shouted. Let me show you the Knights of Caliban, another cried. I'll take him, others called, and more than a dozen sprang at Axis. Axis only sneered. A single punch sent the first charging Dark Angel flying. Axis rooted himself like a mountain and moved with impossible speed. Every strike landed with lethal precision. Thuds echoed as armor caved, shoulder pads shattered, and men were slammed into walls like ragdolls. Power armor meant little against Axis's iron fists. Some were blasted flat into the alloy and could not move. Too weak? Is this the famed First Legion? Maybe I should sew dresses for all of you. Your fists are so soft, like women's, Axis mocked. Lion's anger flared, but Russ planted himself between Lion and the fray, holding his brother back. The taunt pushed the Dark Angels further. More surged forward, trying to encircle Axis. Axis spun and produced a back elbow that smashed an attacker into the deck. The floor cracked, the man's back armor deformed, and he lodged into the alloy, immobilized. Those left finally accepted what Russ had been saying. This opponent was no ordinary foe, but their pride would not let them yield. Form up, together, a veteran barked. They closed in, synchronized for close combat, hoping to overwhelm him with numbers. Axis's mouth curved. He lifted a single foot and stomped. The training hall shook as if hit by orbital bombardment. A monstrous shockwave exploded outward from Axis's core, hurled every nearby Dark Angel like leaves in a storm. They slammed into walls, the ground everywhere. With one measured stomp, he had annihilated the assembled squad. From where he stood, he had not taken a step. Hundreds of Dark Angels lay spread across the deck, unable to rise, fury and humiliation burning in their faces. Hundreds felled by a gene-seed offspring of Leman Russ, unthinkable. Lion's pupils narrowed. The child's combat power was indeed formidable. Russ sighed and clapped a hand on Lion's shoulder. Now do you understand? This kid is terrifying. Lion was quiet a moment. Then he drew the lion's sword, golden eyes ablaze with fighting light. No, he said, voice bright with hunger. On the contrary, I want to try even harder now. Russ, Chapter 104, Lion King vs. Axis, using fingers as swords. Russ was getting irritated. Fine, do whatever you want. I warned you, if you want to get your ass handed to you, go ahead. The power he's showing is impressive, Lionel Johnson said coldly. But it's not enough to make me, Lionel Johnson, back down. What Axis was displaying now was nothing beyond a Gene-Seed Primarch's baseline. A Gene-Seed Primarch of that caliber could effortlessly defeat hundreds of Space Marines. Axis rolled his neck and grinned. That's more like it. Fighting cannon fodder is boring. The Lion's physique was reputed to be among the best of the Primarchs, on par with Russ, Vulcan, and Angron, making him one of the physically strongest. Axis had gone a long time without a worthy sparring partner. Old Man Russ knew Axis's true strength and wasn't about to offer himself up as a punching bag. Thor and Duo were both busy, one on Fenris, the other occupied strengthening the Space Wolves, so when a top-tier opponent presented himself, Axis didn't hesitate. Follow me. We're going to the training yard. Lion L. Johnson slung his blade over his shoulder and led them to a massive training hall on the lower deck of the Indomitable Truth. The chamber was decorated like an ancient knightly monastery, a deliberate recreation of Caliban's old training grounds. Since his return to the Imperium, the Lion had remodeled the basement of his flagship into something that reminded him of the Knights of Caliban. "Axis, go easy on him," Russ murmured with his arm draped over Axis's shoulders. He even used psychic speech, projecting the words directly, fearful his proud elder brother might overhear. Axis smiled and nodded, understanding. Gene Seed Primarchs healed fast. Axis could be badly injured and still recover in days. There was no danger of a permanent death. The best he could expect was a severe beating. "Stop fooling around, you brat. This isn't just a challenge from me. This is Father's order." Russ sent the warning psychically. "Father, the Emperor ordered Lionel Johnson to test my strength?" Axis replied over psychic link. That didn't make sense. If the Emperor didn't already know how strong Axis was, he wouldn't have sent him to deal with the second Primarch right after his modifications. Unless the Emperor felt the Lion had grown too proud and wanted to humble him. But the Lion was controlled, not arrogant. "Just be careful and hold back a little," Russ said. Axis nodded, and the three arrived in the great chamber. Lionel Johnson stood there, sword in hand, clad in green power armor, his eyes cold on Russ and Axis. "You're not wearing armor. I have spare Terminator suits. If you don't mind, put one on." "No need," Axis said, shaking his head. Power armor wouldn't increase his combat ability. A casual power-up from him could tear through any suit. Armor only provided chemical and radiation protection, and in an oxygenated safe compartment, Axis scorned it. "What about a weapon, then? You don't even need a weapon," the Lion asked. "Weapon?" Axis smiled. "I'll use this." A golden light swelled around him. Axis extended a single finger and condensed a ball of ki around it. He was partially manifesting Super Saiyan power, enough of the form to boost his strength and ki. The weapon he intended to use was his own ki. "My weapon is a power sword. Take this seriously," Lionel Johnson said, raising the Lion sword and aiming it at Axis. To him, it was absurd that this kid would face a Primarch with only a finger. "Don't worry, this is enough." Axis's Super Saiyan ki was different from anything the Lion had seen. It fundamentally enhanced the body. Super Saiyan power multiplied physical capability many times over. Over the years, Axis had learned that his specially in Super Saiyan form could resist disassembler fields. That was why he was comfortable going unarmed. The Lion's golden pupils narrowed. He ignited the Lion's sword's disassembler field, and the blade took on an eerie blue glow. He stepped, the deck fracturing beneath, and became a green blur as he slashed toward Axis's throat. The strike was lightning fast, faster than most could track. Clang! A sharp metallic ring filled the hall. Axis stood perfectly still, lifting a single finger. The golden key at his fingertips slammed into the Lion sword's disassembler field, showering sparks. "What?" Lionel Johnson's pupils contracted. His Emperor-blessed blade, capable of cutting through even Titan armor, had been stopped by a finger. "The disassembler is good, but," Axis grinned, "my ki is stronger." The golden flame on Axis's finger erupted and formed into a 1-meter ki blade. He had fashioned a sword of pure ki, an intangible weapon, learned from mimicry of martial arts and wuxia he'd seen in another life. "Your sword is a tangible weapon. Mine is not," he said with a cocky tilt. He swung. A shockwave ran down the ki blade and slammed into Lionel Johnson. Boom! The Lion was knocked back several paces. The alloy deck beneath him fissured. A tremor pulsed through his sword arm, and a sharp sting ran across his hand. For the first time, a trace of solemnity touched his features. "I truly underestimated you," he admitted. He roared, muscles coiling, the full terrifying strength of a Gene Seed Primarch erupting. Again! The Lion's strikes became a hurricane. Each blow could cleave mountains, each passage of the blade tearing the air apart. But Axis remained planted, meeting each swing with a single finger. His posture was casual but exact. Every slash was parried. Golden ki and disassembler fields collided, sparks flying. Clang, clang, clang. The floor cracked under the onslaught. Russ hid his face in exasperation. "This kid, he won't give quarter." "Ha!" Lionel Johnson changed rhythm and angle, his sword arcing toward Axis's ribs with a strike faster than sight. Even a Primarch's reactions would struggle against it. Axis met it easily, the intangible ki sword locking down the blow. It forced the Lion onto the defensive, frantically parrying, unable to mount a counterattack. Each of Axis's replies hit heavy and precise. The Lion was pushed to exert every ounce of his strength. This was like being taught by a master, but he could see through all of the lion's moves. He couldn't win. Metal nicks began to scar the lion's sword's field. Axis's key sliced at the disassembler field until it buckled. Then, with a deft motion, Axis's finger pressed the lion's wrist and snapped. Vroom! A brutal shockwave drove up the lion's arm. His limb went numb. The lion's sword flew from his grip and slammed into the distant wall with a clang. The blade embedded in the bulkhead. Lionel Johnson sank to his knees, trembling and gasping. The pressure had been overwhelming. Since he'd become sentient, no one had suppressed him like this. Even the Emperor had only bested him with psychic might. In pure physical combat, the lion had never tasted such despair. "You lose," Axis said, and the key sword evaporated. He considered, briefly, whether he should learn to launch the Keyblade, like Krillin's Keyblast or the Six Meridians' Divine Sword. The thought made him grin. It would be quite the flourish. The Keyblast he fired was every bit as deadly as a proper key attack. Anyone struck by it would almost certainly die. Key had many applications. Axis remembered similar techniques from Dragon Ball. Members of Cooler's armored squadron, for example, had developed comparable energy attacks. With precise control over his Kai, Axis could even guide the blast to track a target. The move was flawless. He could imagine borrowing elements from other anime, maybe a Rasen Shuriken-style spiral, and adapting them with Kai. It might not match the raw destructive force of a pure key bomb, but it looked spectacular. Axis shook his head and glanced at Lionel Johnson, who was kneeling nearby. The lion had already gotten to his feet, his expression a tangled mix of frustration and resignation. At last he gave a helpless sigh. "You were right. I lost, completely and utterly," Lion admitted. "Your strength is far beyond anything I imagined." It had been a humiliating defeat, absolute, overwhelming. "There's no shame in losing to me, Second Primarch," Axis said. "Even my father can't match me." He smiled faintly. "And to be frank, your technique isn't inferior to mine. If anything, it's better. But your speed, your reactions, and your sheer strength were off the charts. You could neutralize my attacks, yet any one of my strikes forced you to defend with everything you had. It made you feel helpless." Lion's features tightened. He could feel the truth of it. His technique and skill weren't the problem. Axis's tempo and power completely suppressed him. It was like a child outmaneuvering an adult, and the adult had no way to land a decisive blow. Axis thought of Dragon Ball again. When your combat power eclipses someone else's so utterly, you can toy with them. He could have finished the lion with his arms folded, if he'd wanted. To Axis, the lion's attacks had seemed like slow-mo replays. They weren't on the same level. "Is that all you've got? I have the feeling you were holding back," Lionel Johnson asked. The golden glow that had burst from Axis earlier hinted at something deeper, a reservoir of power the lion had sensed but not seen. "That's right," Axis replied. "That was only a fraction of my strength. I didn't use my full power. I have a special transformation. When I activate it, golden key erupts across my body, my hair stands up and turns gold, and my pupils go green. In that state, my combat power increases more than 50-fold. The golden aura you saw was just a partial expression of that form." A partial Super Saiyan manifestation, Axis winced inwardly at the analogy, was not the same as a crude mimicry. Such an expression only comes when you've mastered the transformation and can use it reliably. It would certainly be used openly in the future. There was no point in hiding it now. Russ already knew about this form. The only thing he didn't know about was the legendary Super Saiyan. "Humph. Does your transformation have a great ape stage as well? Father told me about that," Lion asked. One of the Emperor's tasks to his sons had been to investigate the mechanics of the great ape transformation. Lion wanted Axis to demonstrate it, but Axis hadn't shown it in combat. The golden form, a 50-fold boost, that alone was terrifying. Even an ordinary man, amplified by that amount, would crush an Astartes. Russ cut in. "The great ape form is just a mindless berserk state. Its power gain is nowhere near the golden transformation, only about 10 times. It's messy and dangerous. The conditions are harsh. You need a tail and a bright, round satellite reflecting light at the right distance. Axis used it as a child and nearly killed himself. Luckily, his tail was removed afterward. Still, Axis is always cautious and wears a protective visor when planets have such moons." Lion's expression hardened. There are things I need to tell you, Axis. You are not a custodian. Axis's strength had already convinced Lionel Johnson this was a fighting power beyond that of a standard gene seed Primarch. So Lion decided to finish the task the Emperor had given him and lay out what he knew. What do you mean? Axis, what are you saying? He's a space marine. Russ burst out. Only he had been told Axis underwent custodian modification. Publicly, Axis was always presented as a space marine. Lion snorted coldly. Father told me everything. Now shut up and listen. Axis's mouth twitched. He guessed Russ was the only one kept in the dark. After you were brought to Holy Terra, your genetic modifications were performed in the Emperor's lowest chambers in the Himalayas. That facility wasn't for custodian surgeries. It's where Father once created the gene seed Primarchs. You didn't receive custodian modification. You underwent a Primarch-level gene seed modification. Except that you weren't infused with Father's bloodline. Your modifications were those of a Primarch. Primarch? Russ's voice nearly cracked. Are you serious? Axis is actually a gene seed Primarch? Axis played the part of stunned innocence, feigning surprise. Am I a Primarch? No. Father said Primarchs can't be replicated. Not even he can make new ones, Russ stammered. We were created by Father, Lion said. But if you think I would bring a Gloriana-class battleship here for someone who wasn't at least Primarch grade, then you don't understand. That ship began construction when Axis's modifications started. It took 50 years to build. If the Emperor could create one Primarch-level gene seed, perhaps he could create more. But there must be something special about the original Primarchs, some warp-related distinction. Maybe Axis had the Primarch-grade body but lacked that warp essence. Axis had created a soul projection through an unusual method, though, and could use psychic power, perhaps enough to compensate. So what's your point? Russ asked. Is Father planning to let Axis raise his own legion? Not yet, Lion said. Right now, Axis needs to keep serving as a space marine. Your gene seed, well, Axis's gene seed, has two major flaws. First, it can trigger a great ape transformation. Second, it produces a new kind of cell that aggressively consumes the recipient's original cells and converts them to Axis's physiology. But it only completes the conversion halfway. At that midpoint, the cells die from lack of Chi nourishment. Father had told Lion that Axis was indeed Primarch grade in body and combat power, perhaps exceeding what was required. But without a viable, stable gene seed for offspring, he would be a Primarch in name only. So you want Axis to solve those problems? Russ asked. Exactly. Father should have told us sooner. The great ape issue is solved by cutting off the tail. Do Axis's gene seed offspring have tails? Russ pointed out, the tail is the trigger. Without it, there's no great ape. Another option is a visor to block reflected moonlight, which also works. Lion replied, Father only told me about the flaws. I haven't seen the finished offspring myself. I'll report this to Father, either cut the tail or devise a protective visor. As for the key problem, Russ continued, there's a way. Axis's Chi can be used to perfect his gene seed. If his Chi is infused into the gene seed, the modification should complete properly. The offspring might not wield Ki themselves, but at least they'd survive. Axis listened. He wanted the offspring to be fully controllable, and most importantly, to have human bloodlines purer than a half-breed, criteria the Emperor would accept. He decided it was time to tell Lionel Johnson about the cultivators, the best source of Ki, and about the special being who worked with Magnus. You mean there's an alien species that can fuse with human genes and provides Ki? Lion asked, surprised. Not aliens, half-breeds, Russ corrected. We've refined the cultivation method, growing them from gene seeds, so the changes are minimal and almost unnoticeable. I understand. Could one be made from my gene seed? Lion asked. You can have one, Axis said, but it'll cost extra. Axis had given one to Magnus because Magnus had helped him awaken his psychic power, build his intellect library, and teach him psychic arts. Russ was his father. That was a friendly gesture. But Lion would have to pay. This wasn't charity. Chapter 106, Black Angel Contract, the cultivator who died of old age. Lionel Johnson stared. Money? He hadn't heard that word in a long time. Don't look at me like that. This stuff is precious. I only have a few left. If my legion can truly be established, then these special cultivators will serve as apothecaries for my men. Otherwise, there's no way to cultivate suitable gene seed offspring, Axis said. The future role of the cultivators was crucial. He couldn't hand one to every gene seed Primarch, or at least half would rebel. Russ, standing nearby, twitched the corner of his mouth. Are your cultivator seeds a few left? You clearly have more than 20. Lionel Johnson cleared his throat. What do you mean by money? Are you asking for the currency currently used by the Imperium? To us, it's just a number. How much do you want? For context, in the 40K era, the common currency is known as throne gelt. There isn't clear detail for the 30K era. What is money? For gene seed primarchs, planetary governors, and the like, money is little more than a string of numbers. Real value lies in rare goods or command over resources. Even a Space Marine captain can be assigned sums beyond imagination. Many newly conquered human worlds still use their local currencies. The Imperium's monetary system isn't unified yet. War resources move only by the Emperor's decree. Life itself is the currency of the Imperium. It's just a metaphor. I can't give this away for free, Axis said. Asking for money meant wanting a favor. He didn't mean imperial currency. That was as good as paper among mortals, varying from planet to planet. Oh, so what do you want? Lion asked. After everything, this youngster wanted some sort of advantage. Axis stroked his chin and considered. What does he lack? Top-tier power armor? No. Power weapons? No. Battleships? Not really. He already had a Glory Queen, and if he became a Primarch, the Mars Mechanicum could tailor craft to his needs. There was nothing obvious he needed. How about this? A blank commission, Russ offered. Lion, sign your name. If Axis ever needs it in the future, he can use this to mobilize the Dark Angels once to assist in battle. No, the authority to mobilize a Space Marine Legion belongs only to their gene seed Primarchs and the Emperor, Lion said flatly. It won't threaten the Imperium or betray the Emperor. It's only to have the Dark Angels come to Axis's aid once, Russ argued. It was the most face-saving reward Russ could think of. Axis nodded. It was sensible. Being able to call on the Dark Angels freely in the future would be useful, mostly as a last resort. And Axis wasn't trying to hand over command of a legion. He only wanted limited assistance. I absolutely cannot entrust the Legion's strength to others. There must be limits, Lion insisted. Then limit it to under 3,000, Axis proposed. With your order, I can mobilize a Dark Angels force not exceeding 3,000. Your gene seed offspring will honor the agreement. Split into chapters in later generations, a chapter numbered roughly 1,000. 3,000 men would be like 3 chapters, trivial to a legion of hundreds of thousands. Lion thought it hardly mattered. This is acceptable, Lion agreed. 3,000 warriors was barely a drop in the ocean. He took out a document and began drafting the order. Also, 3 uses, Axis added. In case you're not around in the future, the Dark Angels must still honor it. Lion agreed without hesitation. How could he not be around? To him, the order was inconsequential. He didn't grasp how impressive it would look later when Axis produced a Primarch-signed commission to a Dark Angels chapter commander. To ensure authenticity, Lion recorded a video statement. In it, he reiterated Axis's terms. Even if he were absent from the Legion, the Dark Angels must obey Axis's commands 3 times, each time sending no more than 3,000 men. The contract would be held in 2 copies, one by Lion, one by Axis, and Russ signed both copies as a witness. Okay, Lion made a good deal, Russ said. Axis's cultivators qualify as abhumans and even as standard Imperial humans. They can channel Chi to strengthen your warriors, and Chi can be used to purify gene seed, restoring it to an unmutated perfect state. My gene seed is already pure. No mutations, Lion replied, confident in the stability of his stock. You'll see if you try, Russ shrugged. When do we start planting? How long will it take? Lion asked. We can start now. Russ and I will fetch the materials. You prepare high-quality soil, nutrient solution, and 1 gene seed, Axis instructed. I'll prepare them now. Lion nodded. Soon Russ and Axis returned to their flagship aboard a small transport. Axis ordered all members of the 14th Company to prepare to receive the Gloriana-class battleship. Then he went to the rest area, opened the safe, and took out a cultivator seed. Axis still had 23 of them left. This was the 5th he had taken out to use. Axis, what happened when you met with Lion? Are you really going to give him a cultivator? Kasha asked as she approached. I got into it with the Dark Angels, and with the Lion King, Axis said, smiling. He owes me a favor. I'll give him a cultivator gene seed offspring. With this, I'm pretty much guaranteed Primarch status. After we defeat the Raiden, you'll come back to Holy Terra with me. By then, I'll be a Primarch, and you'll regain your Imperial Princess title. Axis told Kasha about the visit, produced the signed order, and showed the preserved video. You're considerate. I thank you on Lion's behalf, Kasha said. A 3,000-man commission was like a gift to her. After the war, could she finally reclaim her true identity? Haha, he's my brother-in-law, after all. I've got to look out for him, Axis laughed. With that order, he could cause headaches for the Dark Angels later. If he wanted to discover their secrets, he could. Oh, Axis, your first cultivator's life cycle has ended. I can't even tell if it's dead or alive now, Kasha said. I know. How is it? Axis asked. It became a tree a few days ago. It's already bloomed and is expected to bear seeds soon, she answered. Axis's first cultivator had been left unmodified, its most original form, so its natural lifespan was only a few decades. The remaining cultivators had used Primarch genes, giving them Astartes-level lifespans of at least 1,000 years, possibly far longer. Let's go see. They entered a hidden laboratory together. The first cultivator no longer looked humanoid. It had transformed into a green tree over 10 meters tall and required vast amounts of nutrient solution. Its life was ending, and it was about to bloom and produce new seeds. I expect to harvest a lot of seeds this time. Will they be the same as yours? Kasha asked. No, they'll be different. Chi is an unavoidable hurdle. I'm not even sure these seeds can grow into new cultivators, Axis said. Even if they sprouted, their combat power would likely be much weaker. This first cultivator had been an experiment. Could a cultivator developed outside the Dragon Ball world after natural death produce viable seeds in this universe? Only the purest, unaltered cultivators could become new cultivator trees and bear orthodox seeds. Those infused with other organisms' genes, like the ones altered with Primarch DNA, were no longer orthodox and couldn't reproduce normally. If these cultivator seeds couldn't be planted at all, then the key-infused cultivator seeds Axis possessed would become collector's items. Axis would have to consider the seed's lifespan. Otherwise, the last batch might be used up before they were ever employed. Axis stepped forward and touched the swollen cultivator flower bud that was packed with seeds. He estimated he could harvest several hundred. If they lack ki and only have that fusion ability, you'll have to splice in special genes, Kasha said. But that would make for an alien army, Axis. Don't let them get exposed. That's a good point. I understand. Axis nodded. Splicing other creatures' genes wasn't out of the question. He even joked to himself about making his homeworld Catachan, brutal to most life, but ideal for science. Conscription would be fierce. Catachan toughs were renowned. He could imagine recruiting hard-bodied fighters in droves. Let's experiment later. Maybe we can add some immortal blood and see if it turns your cultivators immortal, Kasha added. I know. The seeds will take a few more days to mature. I'll leave now. Take good care of them. Axis said it and left. Kasha watched him go, torn between duty and a private, mischievous thought. Perhaps she could use a drop of her old man's blood to cultivate a special seed. It would be difficult and probably dangerous, but the idea made her expression go small and wicked. She'd turned into a scheming little black-clad troublemaker. Axis rendezvoused with Russ and boarded a small transport to Lionel Johnson's flagship, the Truth. After greetings, they wasted no time and descended to an underground lab already ringed with rich black soil. Several large barrels of nutrient solution sat ready, and there was a gene seed from Lionel Johnson himself. Compared to Russ's and Magnus's, L. Johnson's gene seed was superior. Its warp signature was almost nil. Axis still felt a faint trace of warp energy and used his ki to baptize the seed. Within minutes, the small fleshy sprouts at the seed's surface were purified, leaving a perfectly smooth kernel. Is this the perfect gene seed you mentioned? It just looks very smooth, Lionel Johnson said. It's not just the look, Russ replied. When you implant perfect gene seeds into new recruits, the benefits go beyond what you imagine. Once your special gene seed offspring is cultivated, he can help evolve your gene seeds. It's very effective. Russ truly envied L. Johnson's stability, no mutation at all. No wonder his legion had always been among the strongest before the Primarchs returned. The stability of the gene seed mattered. Lionel Johnson nodded thoughtfully. Axis buried the perfect gene seed in the soil, placed a cultivator seed on top, covered it carefully, opened the nutrient solution and poured it over, and even coaxed L. Johnson into letting a drop of his blood water the planting. Axis then stimulated the site with Ki. A few hours later, a special cultivator hatched. Before them stood a human figure, 8 parts like L. Johnson, a touch of yellowish skin, a bald head, slightly pointed ears. He was massive, about 2.4 meters tall, with explosive musculature, half a head taller than an average space marine. "Father," the new being said, kneeling on one knee. At the same time, Axis established a psychic link with him, granting himself the highest control authority. L. Johnson stared, disbelief written across his face. He had expected some kind of monster. He never imagined a human. By imperial law, this was a human, not a demi-human. He could also feel that faint, familiar connection between a gene seed Primarch and his offspring. "See, L. Johnson? This is the cultivator Axis, made using your gene seed. I wasn't lying. He really looks human. Plant him with a gene seed, and he'll develop 19 Astartes' superhuman organs." Russ grinned. "This is unique. I can feel my link to him. He is human," L. Johnson said, stunned. The new cultivator could be presented to the Legion without scandal. His skin was only slightly yellowed. "Father, please give me a name," the cultivator asked. L. Johnson thought for a moment. "From this day, you shall be called Lucifer." He hesitated, then added, "It's a name from the old Terra myths, a dark angel." He had almost chosen Gabriel, but Lucifer felt right. Axis, standing at the side, had to hide a twitch of amusement. Lucifer, an infamous fallen angel, made an excellent provocative name. Like Horus, the name carried a history of betrayal. Axis wondered, half-jokingly, whether he might one day arrange for this new brother to become a fallen angel of his own. "Yes, Father. From this day, I am your gene seed offspring, Lucifer." The newcomer rose and bowed toward L. Johnson. "From now on, you will serve as my personal bodyguard. You have a black carapace. Go and be fitted with Terminator power armor," L. Johnson instructed, and the Dark Angels nearby seized Lucifer to take him to be armored. "Axis, I feel this gene seed offspring is incredibly strong in combat," L. Johnson told Axis after Lucifer was led away. "He is very strong," Axis replied. "If he uses Ki, he could even defeat a gene seed Primarch. Without Ki, he's still comparable to a Primarch." The Astartes version cultivator outmatched the duo who had been planted earlier. Its base combat power neared 8,000 and was likely to exceed 10,000 with growth. These cultivator Astartes could grow through cultivation as well, though their progress would be slower and their aptitude uneven. "You've given me a great gift. I was just looking for someone to spar with," L. Johnson said, thrilled. With this offspring, he had an ideal sparring partner. "Once we return to Holy Terra, use your Ki to evolve perfect gene seeds, and you can found your Astartes Legion. I can help prepare some recruits. Our Caliban Knights are excellent," Axis offered. Having obtained Lucifer, L. Johnson felt he owed Axis a debt that a transfer order couldn't repay. He promised to send new recruits once Axis's Legion was ready. "I won't be polite then," Axis smiled. "Fenris can provide a batch as well," Russ added, slapping Axis on the shoulder. Axis's new Legion would, in practice, be a sub-legion of the Space Wolves. Russ had already agreed they'd keep close ties. Many of Axis's initial warriors would come from Fenris until he chose a homeworld. A few days later, the giant tree that had housed Axis's first cultivator finally died. The enormous bud split open and scattered hundreds of seeds. The trunk withered away. Axis and Kasha went to the secret laboratory and gathered the cultivated seeds. "Axis, all the seeds are collected. This little one's soul is ascending to the Empyrean," Kasha said. Through her psychic senses, she could see the green cultivator's spirit slipping into the warp, a transparent green wraith waving at them. Axis's face grew serious. He closed his eyes and released his own psychic power. Chapter 108, Update later today for my father's birthday. Today's update will come in the afternoon. My father is celebrating his birthday, and our family is going to a hot pot buffet at noon. I hope everyone understands that I won't be taking a day off. Chapter 109, Materialized Soul, Body, Resurrection, Rebirth? After more than 20 years of training, Axis could now partially project his soul using his psychic power. Projecting his soul greatly amplified his own psychic strength. Under that influence, the flickering green soul of the cultivator was intercepted and prevented from slipping into the warp. Axis knew all too well what awaited souls in the warp. It was no paradise, but a hell. The warp had become a cesspit. Once a soul entered, it was likely to be devoured by some demon or other. This cultivator, having been nourished by Ki for over 26 years, was unusually potent. It wasn't as strong as the handful of the most powerful souls, but it far exceeded that of an ordinary psyker. It was a soul shaped and strengthened by Ki. If such a soul fell into the warp, it would be an irresistible feast for demons. It would act like a beacon, drawing countless predators, and could be overwhelmed instantly, perhaps even consumed as sustenance for a great demon. Worse, by devouring a soul, a demon could steal fragments of the living being's memories. If this cultivator's soul were devoured, many of Axis's secrets could be exposed. Under no circumstances could that first cultivator's soul be allowed to enter the warp. Kasha, souls are destined for the warp. They can't persist in the real universe for long. Soul said with a helpless expression. It was a grudging acceptance. Souls simply couldn't remain in the physical universe, and the warp was the final destination for the dead. As life in the real universe continued to die, the sea of souls would only grow stronger. But that doesn't mean it's impossible now, Axis replied with a smile. Don't forget the wonder of Ki. Ki from the Dragon Ball world had an extraordinary effect on soul bodies. Although these two cultivators had originated in the Warhammer universe and lacked the angelic aura of that realm, the Dragon Ball Ki had already caused their souls to materialize. Now, with more than 20 years of cultivation behind them, and with Axis's Super Saiyan Ki assisting, it was not difficult to sustain a body in reality. Axis's golden green Ki wrapped around the cultivator's trembling soul, flowing into it without cease. Super Saiyan Ki seemed endless, and with Axis's modified body and the life forge inside him, his Ki would not be depleted even after months of continuous projection. Let me help. He's my senior brother, Soul said, stepping forward and pouring his Ki into the soul as well. Like a rising tide, their combined Kai rushed into the flickering green spirit. After more than 10 hours, the ghostly presence began to coalesce. Bones, muscles, skin, all formed under Kai's shaping power. At last, a physical form with a soul, one that could walk in the real universe, emerged. The green cultivator's body had changed. He now stood over 1.80 meters, limbs slender and proportioned, still recognizably a cultivator, but stronger and more composed than before. Master, I have a body again. I can feel my heartbeat. Am I dead? No, I can feel. I can smell. I seem no different from being alive, the cultivator stammered, astonished and confused. He could not yet understand his state. As a cultivator, he had lived out the normal span. Ordinary cultivators lived only about 10 years. By serving his master, he had reached 26 years before death came. He had never expected rebirth, and certainly not rebirth as a soul body. Master, I feel no different than when I was alive. I sense a physical body, but it is made of soul, he added, struggling to describe the surreal feeling. Kasha stared at the tall green figure in disbelief. She had watched him die, had seen him turn to a giant tree that bore fruit, and now, in an instant, he was reborn in the real universe as a soul body. It defied everything she knew. No, even her father's formidable psychic powers could not do such a thing. Only the Chaos Four Gods could resurrect the dead directly. The Chaos Four Gods can do that, she said, incredulous. They're terrifying. When they toyed with the Emperor, he wasn't even taking them seriously. That sort of power, it's above even the Emperor unless one ascends far beyond him. Don't underestimate Ki, Axis said. This cultivator's soul has been fed on Ki for 26 years, and then Soul and I lent him additional Kai. That let his soul possess a physical form. Even if he's technically dead, he can maintain his body's existence, and he's no longer limited by a normal lifespan. Axis explained the key point. Ordinary souls were like white mists, without physical substance, but strong beings could maintain their bodies in the underworld if their power reached a certain level. This wasn't a mercy granted by the underworld, it was the result of Ki cultivation. Kasha stepped forward and touched Phoenix's, he'd already started thinking of a name, skin. The warmth under her palm was real. This can't be, she whispered. A soul with temperature? A body made of soul, indistinguishable from a living body? I don't believe it. All of this is happening in front of you, Axis said, smiling. Do you no longer trust your own eyes? Kasha took a steadying breath. Axis, you must realize what this means. This breaks the line between life and death. If Ki can truly restore the dead, the implications... It's not that simple, Axis interrupted. This one revived because his soul was already powerful from 26 years of Ki cultivation. I only assisted. If it were an ordinary human, or even a strong psyker, I couldn't do this. Strength you earn by your own cultivation is different from strength I can lend. If Kasha suddenly died right now, I couldn't bring her back merely by pouring Ki into her soul. Kasha relaxed. If there were strict limits, if a soul had to be built up by its own cultivation first, then the consequences were less terrifying. She accepted that. Ki was amazing, but restored life out of thin air would be a power beyond even the top gods. Axis said nothing but smiled inwardly. He couldn't do full resurrection yet, but his Ki continued to grow. If ordinary Ki was insufficient now, what of a god-level Kai? A Super Saiyan god, a god of destruction, in time perhaps. Let's give you a name, Axis said, looking at the newly reborn cultivator. Today is your rebirth. Do you want to choose your own, or shall I? Great Master, please give me a name, the cultivator said, eyes shining. I wish to follow at your side again, and this time I will fight for you. Axis considered and nodded. From this day forward, your name will be Phoenix, like the bird reborn from flame. The cultivator knelt on one knee. Master, I will be called Phoenix. I will be reborn for you. Congratulations, brother, Saul said, clapping Phoenix on the shoulder. Phoenix's form was still very much a cultivator's, primitive and green. Later generations had human genes added and looked less alien. Phoenix and Saul exchanged a brotherly embrace. He still isn't fit to be seen in public, Kasha observed. Though he'd grown from 1.40 m to 1.80 m, his appearance was distinctly inhuman. That's fine, mistress. I used to lurk in the shadows, and I can do that again, Phoenix said, accepting his role. Maybe later we can alter your appearance, Axis added. For now, stay hidden on the ship. Yes, master, Phoenix replied. Axis turned back to another task. Now let's see whether these new seeds will grow cultivators. He took out a cultivated cultivator seed, one raised in this world, and buried it in the black soil. He watered it with nutrient solution. This time he did not stimulate it with Ki. Once buried and soaked, the seed trembled and quickly took root and sprouted. Unlike the original cultivator seeds from the Dragon Ball world, these didn't need Axis's Ki to germinate. Within a minute, a small green cultivator crawled out of the soil, barely 1.40 m tall. It looked around and scampered straight toward Phoenix, displaying obvious affection as if recognizing a parent. Master, I feel a bloodline connection to this one, Phoenix said, surprised and delighted. He's my offspring. Of course he is. He grew from your seed, Axis replied. But this little one shows no trace of Ki. He's pure plant life. Without Ki enhancement, his combat power is only about 60 points, roughly 1/20th of an original cultivator. He could overpower ordinary humans, but he would be helpless against an Astartes. A space marine in even minimal armor, with their augmentations and weapons, would outmatch him. Phoenix looked at the tiny green creature, protective. Master, could you stimulate my seed with Ki again? Maybe your Ki will cause unexpected changes. Axis watched the two, brother and offspring, then the small sprout's bright, unsteady gaze. He smiled and prepared to experiment once more. Chapter 110, Second Generation Cultivator Fusion Option. Randan is coming, Axis nodded. Injecting Chi energy was indeed an option. The cultivators they'd been growing were too weak for him now. Their output was low and their growth rate far slower than orcs. The seeds sprouted quickly, but the individuals matured slowly. Axis, Phoenix is right. Try using Chi, Kasha urged. Maybe it will let these cultivators master Chi energy. Axis took another seed and planted it in the soil. He poured in nutrient solution, then used a light stimulation of his Chi. The seed reacted far more intensely to Axis's Chi than the first-generation ones had. Without hesitation, he pushed more Chi into it. The seed's reaction became violent. Within seconds, it reached a critical point. If he kept injecting, it would explode. These were not the old first-generation cultivator seeds. These were new generation seeds adapted to the Warhammer universe. Their response was completely different. The soil began to tremble. Minutes later, a green cultivator roughly 1.6 meters tall and far more robust than the previous brood burst out of the ground. This one was heavily muscled, a giant beside the earlier model. Axis scanned its combat potential, about 100 points, a touch stronger than an ordinary Astartes, yet it still could not wield chi energy. Axis's infusion had only produced a more powerful specimen, not one capable of channeling chi. Like the last cultivator, this new one immediately knelt before Phoenix and called him father. These second-generation cultivators were deeply loyal to their sire, Phoenix, rather than to Axis. That contrasted sharply with the Dragon Ball World Seeds, which, when stimulated by Axis's chi, would recognize him as their master. If Axis wanted to command those, he'd have to use more brutal Saiyan methods, kill one to warn 100, and so on. The good news was that Phoenix, as their father, could perfectly control these offspring. Master, these children will obey your commands. After being stimulated by your chi, they will become even stronger. Perhaps in the future when planting, I can cultivate them with my own chi, Phoenix said. Fine, these two will follow you for now. If there's any special operation, I'll have them participate. Axis replied. He wondered whether these cultivators could eventually produce viable seeds themselves, and whether their progeny would continue to degrade in quality. If quality kept declining, then an army of them would be useless. In the Dragon Ball world, the dead could keep their bodies, but could only leave the underworld for 24 hours unless special means were used. Phoenix wasn't constrained by those rules, because this wasn't the Dragon Ball universe. The fundamental laws here were different. Phoenix resembled a daemon prince who had achieved daemonhood, except his body was forged of Dragon Ball chi rather than warp energy. Axis, even the cultivators you've strengthened aren't especially powerful in combat. The original forms are the best. You must guard the seeds you have left, Kasha told him as they left the secret lab. I know, they grow in minutes, so I can plant them as needed. I'm thinking of adding other organisms, special plants or animals. What about orcs? Axis said. He'd kept samples of orc flesh and blood after he raised an orc planet. It sat sealed in a stasis field in a cultivation tank. He wondered what would happen if orc spores combined with cultivator seeds. Absolutely not orcs, Kasha snapped. They're too dangerous. I've told you this before. Are you sure you can control the cultivators that grow from them? These second-generation cultivators won't obey you. At best, you can force commands on them. That won't work with orcs. More importantly, orcs have incredible plasticity. Combine cultivators with orc fungi, and you risk empowering the orcs. A single orc boy can overwhelm a human soldier. If you give orcs cultivator-level power, they could even challenge Astartes. Imagine millions or tens of millions of Astartes being matched by orcs. It would be catastrophic. Kasha's tone left no room for argument. If orcs could be controlled safely, someone would have done it an age ago. According to her father, orcs had ravaged the galaxy for tens of millions of years and were a war weapon created by an ancient race. If your technology couldn't surpass that ancient race, you had no business trying to control orcs. They didn't reproduce only when they died. Orcs constantly released spore-like bacteria. Death merely triggered a large detonation. The race was terrifying. All right, I won't touch orcs, for now, Axis conceded. He wasn't a geneticist. He couldn't solve such complex problems alone. Even Tyranids might be outnumbered by orcs without careful strategy. If orcs got cultivator genetics and the boost of whack energy, who knew what monstrosities would result? For now, Axis had plenty of expendable troops. The monstrous fauna of Katakan looked more promising. He wondered whether the Imperium still held that world. After dealing with the Raiden, Axis planned to go to Holy Terra to make inquiries. If he could raise a legion, he would claim Katakan as his homeworld. Over the next half-month, the human fleet stayed in the system. Chagatai Khan of the White Scars even sent supplies. With more mortal troops assembled, Axis's forces fully took over the Gloriana-class battleship and learned every system aboard. Humanity was on the defensive, enduring the Raidon attacks. They'd been able to detect this assault in advance because powerful psychers within the Imperium had foreseen it. Psychers' prophecies could be uncannily accurate. The intellect libraries of the founding chapters often anticipated threats. That was why Axis, Russ, and the Lion had come early to set up defenses. Psychic power wasn't only destructive, it could reveal pieces of the future. The intellect libraries had been an enormous help to the Space Marines. One day, the perimeter sentries sounded the alarm. A rift had opened in the outer reaches of the system, and black, alien vessels poured through. The ships were bizarre and immense, some over 5 kilometers, some exceeding 10, pouring into the system as a massive fleet. Lionel Johnson contacted Axis and Russ at once. 3 Gloriana-class Glory Queen battleships led the remaining human fleet in formation. "The Raiden fleet has arrived," Lionel Johnson reported. "Russ, Axis, this battle is about to begin. Our mission is annihilation. We'll line up our forces and first pound them with long-range lance batteries. Then we'll launch a huge number of boarding craft, storm their hulls, perform decapitation strikes, and plant melta charges." That was a standard Imperial tactic. Soften with artillery, then send Space Marines aboard to cut the head off the enemy and plant melta bombs. "No boarding and no suppressive fire," Axis said. He was already in his combat suit and had strapped on power armor. Kasha and Mater, 2 master psychers, stood by to teleport him at a moment's notice. "Lion King, you're not really going to let him take on that fleet alone, are you?" Lionel Johnson protested. "Relax," Russ said. "This is Axis's fight. You and I will sit in the command center, pour a glass of wine, and watch the show." He had absolute confidence in Axis. "Dad's right, Lion King. Just sit back and enjoy the spectacle," Axis added, nodding at Kasha and Mater. "Be careful," Kasha said. "Our psychic focus will stay locked on you. If anything goes wrong, we'll teleport you back immediately." "Don't worry," Axis replied. Chapter 111. Tremble, Randan. Super Saiyan explodes. Axis gave Mater and Kasha a thumbs up, reassuring them. "Today I'll show you how a Saiyan fights in the universe. The battle markings etched into a Saiyan's bones are waking." Kasha and Mater raised their hands in unison. Psychic energy flickered at their fingertips as the teleportation spell activated. In the next instant, Axis vanished from the bridge and reappeared in the vacuum of space, without life support, standing in the void by nothing but his physical body. Even without power armor, Axis could survive in space for a time. His cosmic survival was stronger than most of the Gene Seed Primarchs. From the perspective of the massive warship, Axis was a speck, almost negligible. His sudden appearance drew no immediate reaction from the Raiden fleet. If they noticed at all, they did not care. To the enemy, he posed no threat. "Axis, be careful. I've detected at least 1,000 Raiden warships, and more are pouring out of the warp. We're ready for battle," Lionel Johnson warned, uneasy. This kid was dangerously arrogant. This wasn't one ship. This was an entire fleet, and more kept emerging. "Trust me, I told you to enjoy the show. The Emperor didn't send me here for nothing," Axis said. He drew a breath, and the chi inside him began to boil. A golden aura flowed around his body. Even the seams of his power armor glowed. Axis tapped into a portion of his Super Saiyan power, enough, he knew, to handle this fleet. When the golden light flared, a terrifying presence rippled through the void. The Raiden fleet registered the tiny but immense energy signature. Several warships adjusted their muzzles and locked onto the dot of light. The Raiden commander at the helm frowned. "What is that?" "A human soldier in power armor, standing before our ships. Are they attempting suicide, or did their fleet abandon him?" Then the energy spikes and the golden glow turned the commander pale. That output was off the charts, far higher than the main guns of their heaviest cruisers. "Quick, concentrate all point defenses. Destroy that thing," he ordered. Before they could fire, Axis raised his right hand, fingers splayed. A thick golden beam erupted from his palm, 1,000 meters across, and struck a Raiden cruiser like a spear of judgment, tearing a shimmering rift through the dark of space. The cruiser's void shield flickered purple, straining to redirect the attack into the warp. The Raiden did rely on sophisticated void shield arrays, but the torrent of chi overloaded it. "Even void shields can be overloaded? Let's see how long you last," Axis sneered, and pushed more power into the beam. The shield failed. The golden wave slammed into the hull. The cruiser writhed and then blew apart, reduced to cosmic dust. The explosion painted Axis's face in firelight. A small, satisfied smirk crossed his lips. "Ha ha! My turn to enjoy myself." Inside the Raiden flagship, the alien commander's 3 pairs of compound eyes narrowed as telemetry spiked. The energy signature from that pinpoint had already surpassed their heaviest cannon readings. Activate all point defenses. Kill that monster. The command cut off as Axis blinked from the edge of their sensors into the very center of the formation. He brought his palms together at his waist in the classic pose from the Dragon Ball world. A brilliant blue ball of energy swelled between his hands, casting light over the silhouettes of 20 nearby warships. Ka! Miha! A 1,000-meter-wide blue wave roared outward. A battleship in its path spun to evade, but its void shield lasted only a fraction of a second before collapsing. Axis's Kamehameha punched through nanometer-grade armor as if it were paper, slicing the ship cleanly in two. The unspent energy surged on, carving a burning corridor through the fleet. Any Redan vessel hit by that blue light found its shields unable to hold for more than a second before erupting into gouts of flame. Axis accelerated, a golden meteor streaking straight into the fleet's flagship. Alien gunfire spat upward and missed. Warp detectors show zero-level fluctuations. This is not psychic energy. This is. An observer sputtered. Boom. Axis detonated another shockwave that shredded several battleships in sequence, then drove his body into the flagship's hull. The ship shuddered. Outer plating exploded like glass. He breached the interior and charged through the corridors where Raiden warriors, tall, dark-skinned, insectile-mouthed brutes, stared in frozen terror. Those without protection were sucked into the vacuum. "Ha-ha! Come entertain me, little fries!" Axis laughed. He moved faster than the eye could track. Fists and feet blurred into a cyclone of destruction. Heads and chests cracked under precise blows. In seconds, the corridor was a carnage of severed limbs and broken bodies. "Let me show you Saiyan savagery," he snarled. Axis rampaged ship to ship. Wherever he struck, metals tore and life turned to dust beneath his chi. In minutes, the boarding parties and crew of each attacked vessel were slaughtered. Charred flesh, broken limbs, unrecognizable corpses littered the corridors. Then he leapt out, targeting the next hull. He boarded again with the same brutal technique, ripping a gaping hole and spilling into the interior. Several desperate Raiden commanders ordered concentrated volleys at the ship Axis occupied. He spun up a green barrier around himself and formed a dense emerald sphere in his palm. He released it, and entire firing ships were blown to pieces. "Not yet. This game's only started. More Raiden keep pouring out of the warp," Axis said, already gathering another green energy ball. It swelled to 1,000 meters as it left his hand and detonated in the fleet's center, destroying hundreds more ships. The human fleet's comm channels were silent. Space Marines and mortal officers watched the feeds in stunned silence as one lone figure, unarmored save for his body, tore through the enemy lines. The sight was biblical, destruction and death in every frame. Can a human really do this? A tech priest breathed, legs trembling. The scene was beyond comprehension, an angel of war or a walking apocalypse. Lionel Johnson clenched his fists, a complex light in his eyes. Axis's power exceeded everything he had imagined. At last, he understood why Russ had said Axis had held back before. Leman Russ laughed, lifting a skin of mead and taking a long, proud swig. "You see that, Lion? That's the strength of my little wolf cub. Don't blink. Watch closely. You're about to witness a war like no other." A Raiden cruiser's void shield had barely flared purple when a giant golden beam ripped through it. Axis held one palm flat. A destructive torrent of energy poured from his hand. The Qigong wave blasted clean through the first warship and kept going, punching through 3 more frigates. A blue-white column of light, brighter than a star, roared outward and shredded warships like paper. "Fire! All ships, fire!" the Raiden commander screamed, his 3 pairs of compound eyes flashing. Tens of thousands of main guns, secondary batteries, and torpedo launchers swung and locked onto the golden figure. Axis didn't dodge. He formed a green barrier and let the enemy volleys crash uselessly against it. Explosions shook nearby vessels. When the flames died, he reappeared unharmed behind his emerald shield. The commander could only stare in stunned disbelief. Had they already left the warp? Was this some warp creature? Axis clapped his hands. His golden aura swelled tenfold. Light poured out, illuminating the void, and detonated like a self-immolation that destroyed several nearby Raiden ships. The aura surged again toward a larger vessel, Glory Queen class, at least larger than the frigates he'd been shredding, and Axis rocketed at it like a meteor. He hit the 25-kilometer mothership head-on. Thick nano-alloy armor melted away like butter. He tore through the interior. Bulkheads exploded, and alien soldiers burst into blood mist wherever he stepped. A Redan warrior barely raised his power longsword before his head was casually blasted away by a flick of Axis's finger, the point of his palm spitting lethal qigong waves that turned men in armor into fragments. 300 fully armed Raiden Imperial guards swarmed in, power blade nets filling the passage. Axis grinned and clenched his fist. No matter how many small fries there are, they're still small fries. Ha! His body erupted with golden light. An incomprehensible blast vaporized the 300 guards. The shockwave raced down the corridors, fracturing the ship's internal skeleton until the mothership tore itself apart and detonated into a brilliant fireball in the vacuum. Axis drifted through the flames like a grim reaper cloaked in gold, laughing with savage delight. This was a Saiyan's pleasure, pure, brutal, intoxicating. "Not enough. Give me more," he roared, palms spreading. Countless golden energy bolts lashed out like a rainstorm, each finding a Raiden vessel. The fleet formation dissolved into a sea of explosions and tumbling debris. Axis wove through the wreckage, each flash marking another ship's end. "Big bang!" he shouted. A golden beam several thousand meters wide washed through the remaining fleet like divine judgment. Where the beam passed, ships evaporated without a trace. Space near the warp rift itself began to twist under the strain. Despair rippled through the Raiden command. This was not a fair fight. It was a slaughter. "Retreat! Retreat!" one commander finally ordered, voice hoarse with terror. The surviving ships spun and fled, trying to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the golden figure. Axis raised a hand. A blazing energy sphere condensed in his palm. "Disappear for me." He sent it outward. The sphere expanded and swallowed a portion of the fleet in blinding white light and a shockwave that even made human shields vibrate. Lionel Johnson and Russ shouted orders to fall back. When the light faded, the Redan fleet was gone. Only drifting wreckage remained. Axis hovered in the wreck-strewn starfield and let out a heavy breath, turning to regard the human fleet with a small, savage smile. The remaining Raiden vessels were already trying to restart their warp drives and flee. Axis let an emerald energy sphere grow between his hands. Alarms went berserk on the human command ship. "Report to Lord Lion. This reading, this power could destroy a planet." "No, the index is still climbing," the officer monitoring the virtual displays stammered, trembling. The meter had pegged out. The energy present was beyond its scale, an amount of power that could obliterate worlds. "Axis, that reading will trigger a warp storm," Lionel Johnson warned over the comms. Axis only laughed. A warp storm would shred the Raiden fleet further. Perfect. A bead of cold sweat rolled down Lionel Johnson's forehead. For the first time, he felt a real chill at what this kid could do. The man before him was barely human in temperament, more beast than man, and disconcertingly, more dangerous than any civilized lie he'd ever countenanced. Axis raised the energy sphere, tens of thousands of meters across, like a small moon above his head. Blue lightning braided into his golden aura. "Stop it, Axis. Don't use such power," Lion pleaded, but Axis ignored him. "This move is called supernova explosion." Axis roared and hurled the sphere at the fleeing remnants. When it struck the first ship, time seemed to hold its breath. The sphere blew up into a domain of destruction measured in astronomical units. Every vessel inside collapsed inward, shattered, and compressed into a blazing white singularity. Then a white light, more dazzling than a supernova, engulfed half a galaxy. Terrifying energy ripples swept across the star fields. Human ships fell back hard, stringing every void shield and defense they had. The entire fleet shuddered. Faces in the command decks went pale. This was doomsday made manifest. Half a galaxy had been erased by a single blow from Axis. Had they hesitated a moment longer, they might have been among the victims. When the light finally died away, exhausted crews collapsed to the deck, coughing and panting. They hadn't died. They had survived. Axis floated in the void amid drifting metal and scorched wreckage. His battle armor was in tatters, the suit beneath it ripped away. He was bare-chested in space, smiling wider than he had any right to. There was a stunned silence across the comm channels until Russ's rasp broke it. By the human emperor, that's a walking exterminatus. On Lion L. Johnson's flagship, a human officer from Colchis dropped to his knees and began to pray. This is God's will. This is exterminatus by the great God Emperor. Lord Axis is the messenger of the God Emperor. Praise the God Emperor. Raised in the perfect city under Lorgar's doctrines, the officer had been taught the Emperor was a god. Seeing a single man wield power to destroy planets and scour half a galaxy, he interpreted it as divine manifest. Others from the perfect city followed suit and knelt. A ripple of fervor spread through some of the human crews. Enough, Lion snapped. My father was never a god. The great son of God. Your father is our god. If he's not, explain what we're seeing. Is this something mere humans can do? The Colchis officer blurted, eyes shining with fanatic conviction. His faith demanded an answer Lion couldn't easily give. Call Axis not human, and you deny the visible miracle. Call him human, and the mortals before him would see godlike power. Lion cursed Lorgar's cult and its deifying rhetoric, and felt, privately, a hot resentment at how it warped people's minds. Axis folded his arms and watched the warp rift's afterglow close. His detonation had sent a storm howling through the warp. The surviving Raiden ships inside were being shredded by the turbulence. He felt the satisfaction of utterly finishing the affair. If he kept pushing, he told himself he might have to ascend beyond his current transformation, go beyond a normal Super Saiyan into something more. Axis, are you okay? Are you still sane? Kasha's voice trembled over the link. She sounded worried he'd gone feral. What nonsense, Axis replied. I'm fine. I'm watching the best fireworks show in the universe. Every time you go like this, I think you're not normal. Come back. Now. The war's over. You destroyed the Raiden fleet. Kasha's words were a mix of relief and fear. Even she, his closest companion, felt shaken by what he'd become. Right, the war's over. You two psychic teleport me back, Axis said. Blue psychic light flared. In an instant, Axis vanished from the ruined starfield and reappeared aboard the human fleet. Chapter 113, Randon Alien Advance Fleet, the Schemer of the Perfect City. Why do you always wreck a suit of power armor in every fight and make it irreparable to boot? Kasha asked, staring at the shirtless Axis with helpless reproach. Small skirmishes were one thing, but in large-scale engagements, whenever Axis powered up his armor was always guaranteed to be destroyed. Even though he was currently wearing a standard suit, treating power armor like a disposable item was extravagant. This is how you be a real man, and it looks badass, Axis said, taking the jacket Mater handed him and shrugging it on. I heard the comms earlier. Lion clearly told you to stand down. Why did you keep attacking? Kasha demanded, pushing the ship's communicator into Axis's hand. You can ask him yourself. Don't be mad. I cleaned up all the enemies, didn't I? Axis chuckled as he took the device. He puffed up his chest. If any other Saiyan had been in this situation, well, they'd have been even worse. He had wiped out the Raiden, leaving no trace. He keyed the comms and called out, How was it, Lion King? Was that show enough for you? Silence answered him at first. Then heavy breathing came through, plainly furious. After a long pause, Lion L. Johnson's deep voice finally cut in. Axis, you bastard! Axis grinned inwardly. Lion, what are you so worked up about? I eliminated all the enemies. The warp storm won't touch us. The storm I made was just enough to stop them from fleeing. This is a war, Axis, not your personal entertainment, Lion said coldly. I saw you playing at fighting. You weren't fighting. You were enjoying yourself. That attitude is wrong. This isn't a game. It's survival for entire races. Axis scowled a little. I'm upholding the Imperial truth. If we don't exterminate them, do you expect humans to make peace with the Raiden? I'm not arguing. You're sympathetic to them. From the moment the Raiden attacked the Imperium, I wanted them exterminated too, Lion said. It's your attitude I object to. Respect your opponents. Arrogance is dangerous. Underestimating an enemy is one of the worst military errors. You need to take future battles seriously. At the very least, leave some prisoners so we can learn about them. Axis shrugged. You can relax there. I respect strong opponents. These guys didn't count. Lion was right. Underestimating an enemy could be fatal. But telling a Saiyan to stop being reckless was almost a contradiction in terms. Axis had been trying to hold back already. Saiyan pride ran in their blood. When it came to recklessness, they were extreme by nature. Let's talk about the real problems, Lion continued. Yes, you destroyed that fleet, but it was only a vanguard. The Rhydon are powerful, and we know too little about them. You also created a warp storm that trapped our ships here. We can't jump out until it eases. If battles flare elsewhere, we won't be able to support them in time. And now we have no captives, no intelligence. You left nothing. Axis felt that familiar defensive twinge. He had seen the human fleet withdraw before he struck, otherwise he would have limited the blast more. The warp storm he caused would last only days, not decades. He wasn't a warp god. Still, the consequences were real. Axis's final strike had vaporized half a star system. If he hadn't ordered the human ships to pull back quickly, many would have been caught in the blast. Even so, the psychological impact on the fleet was profound. Mortals trembled, and even space marines felt their morale shaken. Many mortal crewmen needed rest and psychological care. Without them, the fleet's true fighting power would collapse. Astartes were terrifying shock troops, but they weren't enough to hold and run entire fleets without trained mortals. If half the human crew broke down, the fleet's combat strength would plummet. Lion's anger ratcheted up at the thought of what Perfect City's clergy were doing. They had seized on Axis's act and started preaching across the fleet that he was the Emperor's messenger. Usually, Lion would have quashed such claims and punished the ringleaders, but he couldn't now. The mortal crews needed something to anchor their fear. Religion was the fastest balm. If the mortals believed Axis was the Emperor's messenger and that the annihilation was divine judgment, their frightened minds might stabilize. Without that, many would go mad and never recover their fighting capability. I have it under control, Axis said easily. The storm will end in 2 or 3 days. That will give the mortals time to rest. And next time the Rhydon show up, I'll try to take a prisoner. You're a damned brat, Lion snapped and cut the line. Axis, Lionel Johnson is still our senior commander. Be a bit nicer to him, Russ's voice chimed through the comms. Axis saw Russ give a thumbs up on the holo screen. The Fenrisians weren't shaken by Axis's theatrics. This was the sort of thing Axis had done when conquering planets in the old campaigns. The difference here was that the Rhydon had a much larger fleet than the foes he'd faced previously. I knew my style suited the Space Wolves, Axis laughed. Rest up for a few days, then we'll teach these Xenos a lesson, Russ said, and the call ended. The idea thrilled Axis. The Rhydon had follow-up forces. He might get another chance to tear through their celestial weapons. He had read, in the brief flashes of memory from before his transmigration, about Rhydon battle moons, not crude asteroid hulks like orc war moons, but true artificial planets, more like the Death Star. In the Third Rhydon War, the Rhydon had deployed over a dozen such weapons and nearly crushed the Imperium. The Emperor had to return to Holy Terra and requisition a secret weapon from Mars to turn the tide. The Imperium had then classified every scrap of information about the Rhydon. Rumors even linked them to the disappearance of a missing Primarch, but those were guesses at best. The Rhydon were a race capable of challenging the Imperium. Their defeat here would only make their next strike more ferocious. Axis was eager to get back into his physical body and tear into one of those celestial units. A few days later, the warp storm subsided. The storm Axis had made had only affected this system and left little ripple in the Sea of Souls. Axis sat in the ship's cabin, holding audience with a group of special visitors. Great God Emperor's messenger, praise be to you, praise your deeds and sing of your virtues, intoned a mortally clad religious devotee, kneeling before Axis with the rapture of a fanatic on his face. Axis played the part. He let a little of his Super Saiyan aura bleed out, golden light that washed over him and amplified the man's worship. The worshipper went into even greater ecstasy, chanting and offering prayers. Axis inwardly smiled. He liked having these preachers around. If they didn't spread the worship, how else would he gather the kind of divinity, well, support, he wanted? Besides, it might be useful to protect his troublesome friend Lorgar. It seemed he had better find a way to keep his good brother safe. I am a warrior personally forged by the great God Emperor. I will annihilate every enemy of humanity and become the god of war who protects mankind, Axis declared. A blinding golden radiance flared from him, and the proselytizers from the perfect city grew even more fervent. Praise the great God Emperor. Praise the great protector of humanity, Lord Axis. You are the wrath of the God Emperor, one priest cried, dropping to his knees in rapture. Proselytizing aboard other Primarchs' ships had always been difficult, often met with hostility, but aboard Axis's vessel, they had been welcomed, even personally received, and shown that awe-inspiring glow. It was paradise compared to their usual reception. Lorgar had been right all along. Finally, someone agreed with them. Axis smiled as the priest's words faded. There was a running joke in the galaxy. The Emperor insisted he was not a god. Axis enjoyed it. Since you've come to my ship, I'll treat you well. You're allowed to proselytize here, Axis said. Thank you. Thank the God Emperor for his grace, the priests replied. Under Kasha's direction, they were then escorted away by Axis's aides. Once they were gone, Kasha came up to Axis with a dark expression. Axis, didn't I tell you to brush them off and send them away? What are you doing? Do you know what my father hates most? Axis raised a hand to halt her and looked at her calmly. Kasha, do you think your father is a god? Kasha faltered. My father is certainly not. No. Yes. She trailed off. She wanted to deny it, but her father's displays of power, far beyond ordinary men and even beyond many immortals, spoke louder than any creed. Every piece of evidence, even her mother's insistence, pointed the same way. Her father was a god, one of the most powerful entities in the warp. You already know your answer in your heart, Axis said. It's a ridiculous joke. A god who won't admit he's a god. How else could an ordinary man live forever? How else could he command boundless psychic power? Denial doesn't change what he is. Ordinary immortals do not possess the Emperor's magnitude of power. Axis's tone grew sharper. He thought about Lorgar and Magnus, two of the most regrettable traitors among the Gene Seed Primarchs. Their loyalty to the Emperor had once outshone many loyalist Primarchs. Whatever the Emperor said, Lorgar took as divine command to be enacted with all his might. Magnus, if not for that psychic message, might never have betrayed. 10,000 years later, Lorgar became the founding patriarch of the Imperial Creed. Everyone knew who wrote the Lectitio Divinitatis. The Adepta Sororitas, born of that faith, weren't weak. Their numbers and zeal made them supremely effective on thousands of battlefields. Living saints, like Celestine, sprang from their ranks. Even the so-called Cursed Legion, the Emperor's daemon prince and his daemon army, were a product of the faith's terrifying potency. The faith of humanity was not a trivial thing. So the Emperor denying godhood is the greatest joke in the galaxy, Axis continued. If I can stabilize Lorgar and keep him from rebelling, how will the four Chaos Gods play their hand? I want to help Lorgar found the Imperial Church early. Lorgar doesn't belong stuck as a Gene Seed Primarch. Making him the Pope of a true Imperial faith is the right choice. He would support it wholeheartedly. Kasha, what do you think? Even if my father is a god, he hates being called one. It would displease him if others called me that, she said. The Emperor truly loathed the title of god, no matter what he might actually be. Lorgar's people came to my ship on their own. I didn't invite them, Axis said. How do you know they didn't come with the Emperor's blessing? And I haven't received any orders from your father forbidding their presence. When Lorgar first began preaching, the Emperor had been ambiguous, neither endorsing nor forbidding. He only intervened when zealous proselytizing began to slow the Great Crusade. As long as the crusade advanced, the Emperor tolerated many eccentricities. Primarchs kept secrets, some committed atrocities, and the Emperor looked the other way if the campaign moved forward. Axis had once thought like a custodian, but as a Gene Seed Primarch, he had his own aims now. Chief among them, using Lorgar's religious power for a purpose Axis had long considered. Axis wanted to qualify as a god, not for vanity, but as a weapon against chaos. Becoming a god in the warp required more than martial might. It needed psychic awakening, an immense soul energy, and a sustained warp connection to draw on the faith of believers. Magnus had achieved that on Prospero. The other half of the equation was becoming a symbol. Axis wanted to be the god of war for humanity, the god of war of the universe. Only by comprehending and channeling godlike power could he contend with the Chaos Gods. The hope and faith poured into the Golden Throne for 10,000 years had made the Emperor's power nearly overwhelming during the Siege of Terra. If not for other influences, the Emperor himself might have become another warp entity. Axis reasoned that if Lorgar could be guided to a proper, controllable religion, if the Emperor could be made to accept the legitimacy of a god sanctioned by humanity, then the faith of all mankind could be harnessed to oppose chaos. A plan to isolate the warp outright was impractical. Axis needed a different strategy. Kasha, since you asked, I'll tell you plainly, I want to become a god, Axis said. Kasha went pale. After several long breaths, she hissed, Axis, you can say things like that to me, but not in front of others. It contradicts the imperial truth. The Emperor preaches science and reason, she protested. Shh, Axis snapped. Do you really believe in plain atheism? Have you seen what's in the warp? Do you think those entities there are friendly? The four Chaos Gods are corrupted and terrible, yes, but they're not the only powers there. Orcs have their gods, the Eldar have their pantheon. Humanity deserves its own pantheon too. Their gods just appear in a different form now. Primarchs were born of the warp, secondary divinities in their own right. The most likely origin of human deities was that they were gene seed Primarchs. Even his dour brother Russ suspected there had been no accident about where he had been sent. That's just conjecture from Mother and me, Kasha said quietly. Don't let anyone else hear that. Trust me, my power is enough to protect you. I've grown in this war. Axis's voice brightened. He had brushed the threshold of Super Saiyan 2 during his fight with Zidon and his crew. Lightning had danced over his skin, and his strength had leapt. If he could master that state, Super Saiyan 2 could be stacked atop the first form. He felt the next step within reach. How do you plan to become humanity's god? Kasha asked. A good woman helped her man. This time she chose to stand with Axis. Slowly. First, I must secure recognition as a gene seed Primarch and build my own legion. Then I will cultivate Lorgar's support, make him believe, truly believe, that I am a god, the god of war for humanity. From there, I'll draw the faith of the populace and, through warp links, absorb that power. If a new human war god forms in the warp, I won't stand to be someone's thrall. I must be the one to rise and control it. Kasha's eyes hardened with resolve. I'll help you with everything I have. Chapter 115, Chagatai Khan's Doubts and the War Rekindled. Axis, if it's you, you'll succeed. After weighing everything, Kasha decided to give Axis her full support. If anyone else wanted to become a subspace god, she would have objected outright. The warp was saturated with the malignant forces of the four Chaos Gods. The odds of a benevolent subspace god being born were vanishingly small. Axis, however, was different. His chi inherently resisted the corruption of the warp, and the golden ring on his soul had a powerful purifying effect. Thank you for your support, Kasha. I won't let you down. This is our only chance to defeat the subspace Chaos Four Gods, Axis said. There's one thing, Kasha warned. The energy of the warp is charged with negative emotion. You must find a way to control those emotions. Preserve who you are. Don't become a monster that only knows slaughter and destruction, or you'll become a fifth Chaos God. I understand, Axis replied. Kasha's warning wasn't entirely precise. The subspace Chaos Gods were indeed evil, but good and evil weren't always absolute. What one race considered righteous could be a nightmare to another. Humans themselves had committed atrocities. During the Great Crusade, they had exterminated many Raiden worlds, and one of the Chaos Gods had driven his people to endless war. Axis had the worst tendencies of the Saiyan nature to contend with: cruelty, bloodlust, irritability, and arrogance. He had fought constantly to control them. His rage and destructive impulses had always been aimed at the Raiden, never at humans. Rest up. Don't rush into proselytizing or anything else. For now, you need to win this war, and win it well. Make yourself a figure of renown, Kasha said. Kasha believed their father's decision to send Axis after the Raiden had two aims. First, to get the other gene seed Primarchs to acknowledge Axis's power. Lionel Johnson was the best choice. He was most likely to accept Axis. Chagatai Khan could accept it too. Russ was another matter. The second Primarch had been rescued by Axis and was close to him. If a few elder brothers endorsed Axis, the rest would hesitate to voice doubts, and future commanders would know how to utilize Axis's abilities in the field. Second, there was Axis's peculiar status as a gene seed Primarch. He hadn't been created in the usual way, but modified. If Axis could resolve the issue of his gene seed offspring on Holy Terra, if they could be accepted as normal Astartes, Then the Emperor might formally recognize Axis as a Primarch and broadcast his achievements in the Raiden War and the Great Crusade. He could become a high-ranking public figure of the Empire. If not, the Emperor would likely keep Axis hidden forever, a weapon in the shadows. Axis had told her he was confident he could solve it. This was the gamble. A few days earlier, several light years away from Axis and the others, Chagatai Khan led the White Scars, his 5th Legion, in brutal combat with a Raiden battle group. Though smaller than the force Axis had encountered, this enemy still numbered in the hundreds of warships. Dozens of vessels on both sides were lost in the opening engagements. White Scars boarded Raiden's ships, hand-to-hand clashes erupting in the vacuum. The fighting had been hard, sometimes even going against the Imperial Marines. Then, inexplicably, the Raiden withdrew. A day earlier, they fled the system in haste, abandoning newly built outposts. The retreat bewildered the White Scars. They'd been locked in fierce fighting with no clear advantage, and suddenly the enemy bolted. "It doesn't feel like a trap," one Khan, company commander, said. "They left too hastily." "At first, I suspected a scheme," another Khan said. "But if it were a trap, it was too obvious. That's why we didn't pursue." Chagatai Khan, seasoned by countless battles on the steppe before returning to the Empire, trusted his instincts. An enemy retreating when slightly advantaged was abnormal, unless something grave had happened in their rear. Whatever it was had to be serious enough to force the front line to abandon its positions. "In any case, it's fortunate for us. We've held this system. The Imperial worlds here won't be invaded," Chagatai said. The assembled Khans nodded. "You all take care of your companies. I'll contact Lionel Johnson and Russ. They're probably under even greater pressure," Chagatai added. At the battle's start, Chagatai had maintained continuous contact with Lion and Russ, but a small warp storm had sprung up a few days before, cutting off nearby psychic communications and warp travel. Only yesterday, after the enemy's retreat, had communications partially returned. The Lingyu Jie in charge of psychic relay blinked twice and then looked stunned, as though he'd received impossible news. Khan, Lion L. Johnson, and Leman Russ have reported that the Raiden fleets they faced were completely annihilated, he said. Chagatai stared. "What did you say?" "It was annihilated about 5 days ago," the Lingyu Jie continued. "That event caused the small warp storm that disrupted our comms and travel." Chagatai could barely believe it. Lionel Johnson's force had been battling the main Raiden fleet, an engagement that, by all estimates, should have taken years and spread across a dozen systems. What could possibly wipe out such a force? "Ask Lion and Russ whether they used some secret weapon," Chagatai said. "Find out if the enemy suffered a warp accident or was destroyed by force." The Lingyu Jie opened a new connection, then turned back to Chagatai with a grave expression. "They did use a secret weapon. Lion and Russ's forces used a weapon to annihilate the enemy fleet, and that caused the warp storm." Chagatai's jaw dropped. He didn't press for details. It wasn't his place to pry into the Empire's deepest secrets. He would do his part. "Tell Lion that I'll guarantee the security of the supply lines so his men have ammunition and provisions," he said. The Lingyu Jie relayed the message to Lionel Johnson. Lion acknowledged it without probing. The Emperor intended Chagatai to know about Axis eventually, but Axis's reputation was so extraordinary that casual rumors would be met with disbelief. It was better for Chagatai to see Axis in person before being told the full truth. "How are the other battlefronts?" Lion asked. 9 systems are currently engaged with Raiden forces, the Lingyu Jie reported. 4 systems have lost contact, likely fallen. On 2 other systems, the Raiden have retreated. "We'll split the fleet into 3 task forces," Lion decided. 3 Gloriana-class battleships will reinforce the worlds still fighting. After scanning the situation, Lion issued orders. "Notify Axis. He and the Glory Queen will go to support the binary world system. Russ and I will each support 2 others." One targeted system contained both a hive world and an agricultural world. That system was being assigned to Axis. With Axis's capability, Lion believed the battle could be ended in a single day. Speed was what the war most desperately needed. Where Axis went, the Raiden would not recover. Orders were dispatched, and the main fleet split into 3 routes. Lionel Johnson, Leman Russ, and Axis, each heading to relieve the besieged Imperial worlds. The White Scars prepared reinforcements of their own and readied to secure supply lines as Chagatai had promised. Chapter 1 and 16, Randon Celestial-class Interstellar Fortress. Axis's fleet this time was very small. One Gloriana-class battleship, one Avenger-class, one Dauntless-class cruiser, 4 Sword-class frigates, and a single giant supply ship. Including the accompanying mortal navy and crews, the total number of Space Marines did not exceed 1,500. With forces that meager, everything but the Gloriana could be considered negligible. Yet the true strength of the expedition was not the Imperial ships, it was Axis himself. After several days of warp travel, Axis and his companions arrived in the target star system several light-years away. Commander, the system contains 2 planets in the habitable zone. One has been converted into an agricultural world, the other is a hive world, the mortal commander reported, standing before Axis. The agricultural world is critical. The surrounding Imperial systems depend on it for food. Per administratum orders, we may abandon the hive world, but the agricultural planet must be reclaimed at any cost. It concerns the logistics of several nearby systems. Axis considered for a moment. We're here now. The battle must be finished within a day. I will take both worlds back. Your mission is simple. Scout the enemy situation. The mortal commanders nodded. They had come to understand something of Axis's power after the last engagement. He was a walking exterminatus, the Emperor's wrath made manifest. Even the Space Marines wore an expression of a kind of pious awe. Lord Axis, radar has detected the Zidon fleet, a mortal officer at the observation post called out. Axis walked onto the bridge, hands clasped behind his back. Before him the void stretched, a scatter of distant stars and the system's faint sun. Distances here were measured in astronomical units. With the naked eye, all they could see was a single bright star. Report, how many ships and where are they? He asked. Sir, the enemy is 12 astronomical units out, over 200 Zidon warships, the officer answered. Axis's lips twitched with mild disappointment. He had faced thousands of Zidon ships before. 200 felt almost like a skirmish. What's the situation on the 2 Imperial worlds? Have they fallen? He asked. The local defenses are concentrated on the agricultural world. There's a tug-of-war underway. Zidon landing operations are in progress. As for the hive world, by our observation, it seems to have completely fallen. All human inhabitants there have either been enslaved or killed, replied the naval intelligence officer. Axis's expression darkened for a heartbeat. May their souls return to cough. May their souls return to the Emperor's embrace, he said, catching himself awkwardly. He'd almost said, return to the Golden Throne. Huang Lao Han isn't even sitting on it yet, he thought with private amusement. A Perfect City missionary standing nearby was stunned at first, then elated. He scrambled to record Axis's words. Lord Axis was right. After death, Imperial souls returned to the Divine Emperor. The missionary treated Axis as the Emperor's messenger, and his enthusiasm was contagious. Lord Axis is right. Let us mourn these poor Imperial subjects. They will return to the Divine Emperor's embrace. These Xenos who defile humanity will be judged by Lord Axis, he declaimed. Those aboard observed a solemn moment of silence. The missionary had lately become favored by Axis. Faith in the Emperor still ran deep among many in the Imperium. After Axis's last display, where he had stepped outside the fleet and unleashed power sufficient to flatten a Zidon armada, this was no longer something the crew could explain with science. It looked like the work of a god. I will first clear the Zidon fleet from space and unleash the Empire's wrath on them, Axis said. Your task, assist the local defenders and hold the Zidon back on the agricultural world. Once I've dealt with the fleet, I will descend and finish off the ground forces. All members of the 14th Company are willing to fight for the Wolf Lord. Axis's wolves roared their assent. You will act as the vanguard and enter planetary combat first. Prepare for orbital drop, Axis ordered. Just then the radar officer's hand froze. Lord Axis, a high-energy signal, an enormous vessel the size of a moon. It's a Zidon super battleship. Axis's stride halted. Explain. We've detected a massive object, roughly 2,000 kilometers in diameter, slightly smaller than Earth's moon. The officer's fingers danced over the console, pulling up archived files. According to the records from the First Zidon War, this is their celestial combat carrier, an asteroid-class star fortress. The Glory Queen's machine spirit responded and displayed the data. The image that filled the tactical screen was unmistakable, a moon-sized war fortress, a Death Star-like weapon of unimaginable scale. A faint smile curved Axis's mouth. Lord Axis, this is a Celestial-class weapon. Its firepower far exceeds our Gloriana class. During the First Zayden War, the First Legion rammed one of their Glorianas into it and failed to destroy it. It has extraordinary defenses, a void shield, and an energy force field. They can be used alternately or at the same time, the officer continued, reading out the intelligence Lionel Johnson and the First Legion had uploaded as a courtesy. So what? The Perfect City missionary blurted, unable to contain himself. Before the great divine emperor, before Lord Axis, such an asteroid is nothing but a plaything. Lord Axis will turn it to cosmic dust. Axis chuckled and patted the missionary's shoulder. The young man's flattery was impressive, though Axis still couldn't quite remember his name. Lord Axis, my name is Gels. You can call me Gels, the missionary said, bowing. His whole body trembled. He was about to witness another of the Emperor's miracles. The residents of the agricultural world must be terrified of these Xenos. After the war, go and comfort them, Axis said. He'd had enough flattery for one day and found it convenient to dispatch the boy away. No problem, right? Lord Axis, your words are the Emperor's decree to me. I will carry them out immediately, Gels replied, scurrying off to prepare. Soon Axis's ship closed to within sighting range of the Zidon Armada. The fleet had not yet opened fire. Tension hummed through the bridge. Don't worry, I've got this, Axis told the officers and soldiers around him, then stepped away with Kasha. Be careful, Axis. Zidon's celestial star fortresses are not easy to deal with, Kasha warned, falling into step beside him. The Imperium's technology could not produce planet-sized star fortresses. If Axis were not here, the Emperor himself might have had to descend to settle this. Axis grinned. Don't worry, even if it's planet-sized, I can blow it apart. Honestly, I'm looking forward to smashing that big iron ball. He patted Kasha's shoulder, then donned his gear. Go on, Axis. Give me a grand fireworks show, Kasha said, raising her psychic staff. Of course, I'll prepare a magnificent funeral for this star fortress. Axis let golden energy build around him and activated his Super Saiyan mode. Kasha used her staff to teleport him outside the celestial battleship. Standing before the moon-sized fortress, a wicked smile appeared on Axis's face as the golden power flared from his body. Then, under the incredulous gaze of the Zidon system commander, he charged straight at the star fortress. Bare-handed and unarmored, a single human rushing to ram a moon. Is this man mad? The Zidon commander thought. Who would strike themselves against a starship? What came next would make him change his mind. Chapter 117, Randan, the day the Golden Devil came. Axis's body was wreathed in golden flames that moved like a tangible substance. His form became a brilliant, golden meteor as he hurtled toward the Zidon interstellar fortress at impossible speed. Open fire! Open fire now! Shoot this damn mosquito down! Bellowed the Zidon commander. Tens of thousands of turrets across the fortress flared to life at once, their energy beams knitting into a lethal web. A circular green shield sprang up around Axis as he bore through the barrage. Boom! The impact was earth-shattering. The entire fortress shuddered violently. People lurched and struggled to keep their footing. Axis smashed through the outer void shield and energy barrier, gouging a crater hundreds of meters across in the armor. Inside, alarm klaxons screamed, and Zidon warriors rushed toward damage control stations in a panic. The commander's eyes widened in disbelief. In his experience, no creature had ever dared to charge an interstellar fortress in the open. This was lunacy. Yet here was a creature that had crashed into their ship with its bare body and had already caused massive damage. Report, Commander. The intruder has broken in. Our primary shield has failed. This is impossible, the commander gasped, his three eyes bulging. Activate the second layer of defense. All point defense batteries. Concentrate fire. Eliminate that intruder. Axis stood in the middle of the crater and lifted his right hand. A dazzling qigong wave condensed in his palm and swept outward in a torrent, incinerating turrets, compartments, and defensive arrays alike. The beam plowed through more than 30 kilometers of the fortress, bursting out the far wall and leaving a streak of light in space. Nearby Zidon warships hesitated. Some didn't know whether to engage after watching their flagship mauled. Axis didn't give them time. He hurled several gigantic Qigong bombs that detonated into shattering fragments. Blue and white Qigong ordnance erupted from the fortress in response, striking the surrounding ships. Brilliant fireworks bloomed around the interstellar fortress, and in short order, nearly 200 Zidon vessels encircling it were 90% destroyed by Axis's onslaught. "What beautiful fireworks," he muttered. "Report, 100, over 180 ships destroyed by the intruder." A grim pall fell over the command room. Axis's attack had only just begun. With a low roar, he leapt higher. The golden flames consuming him flared even hotter. His hair went gold, and faint lightning danced across his skin. He clenched his fists and unleashed a series of consecutive punches at the breach. Each blow carried cataclysmic force. Wherever his fist wind passed, the fortress's structure collapsed in on itself, huge fragments torn free like a meteor shower. A squad of Zidon warriors in massive power armor threw themselves at him. These hulking, grotesque creatures shrieked and raised power swords. "I am your death, your destroyer," Axis intoned. The power of a Super Saiyan erupted, and the slaughter began. Axis became a streak of golden lightning through the corridors, leaving carnage in his wake. The armored elites didn't even have time to react before they were shredded by violent energy waves, exploding into a rain of gore. With a single punch, every Zidon within 30 meters burst into a cloud of blood mist. A spinning roundhouse kick sent a shockwave that cleaved through an entire corridor. Organs and blue blood splattered the metal walls, a grotesque, abstract tableau. Hissing with contempt, Axis thought, "How disgusting. So their blood is blue. It almost looks like blueberry juice." An operator was about to fire a turret when Axis appeared in a blur, grabbed the cannon barrel, and squeezed. The turret twisted and collapsed like a crushed can. The man inside screamed as he was mashed into a paste. Blue blood oozed out. Alarms, explosions, and screams rose and fell across the fortress. Axis moved almost leisurely, each step leaving destruction and death behind. He even slowed on purpose, letting fear spread among the Zidon. Scions enjoyed this. Let them be afraid of me. He laughed, sinister, and released Qigong waves from his hands until the surrounding Zidon were reduced to dust. "Stop him! Stop him now!" the commander roared, eyes bloodshot. He had never seen such a thing. The Golden Demon was committing a massacre single-handedly. For a few maddening moments, the commander's memory flashed back to an intelligence report from days earlier. The First Fleet had encountered a lethal warp storm and been destroyed. In truth, a Golden Demon had destroyed the fleet. At first, no one had believed it. How could a single life form obliterate an entire fleet? The transmission had been only a psychic warning with no visual data, and commanders had split. Some heeded it and withdrew. Others dismissed it as exaggeration. He had been one of the skeptics. Now he understood too late that his caution had been folly. "Run! Get out of here!" voices screamed. "This isn't a living being. This is a demon. Help! Somebody save us!" Many Zidon collapsed under the shock. Their proud tech and disciplined tactics meant nothing against this golden horror. Some threw down weapons and fled, some knelt and begged, and many simply froze, their minds robbed by fear. Once they had been conquerors, the Galactic Empire had subjugated countless races, even enslaving humans by ripping out their brains and turning them into puppets. In the last war with humans, they had nearly toppled a high-ranking commander with a new brain control weapon. They had prepared for decades to crush humanity, with manpower, weapons, and resources. Yet now, in their second encounter, they faced a creature that made all their preparations meaningless. No Zidon could stop Axis's advance. He tore his way to the command room, amid a mountain of corpses and rivers of blood. Golden flames bathed the slaughtered room like some corroded altar. He tilted his head to regard the Zidon commander slumped in his chair, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Ha ha ha! You finally understand. You picked the wrong race to provoke. I will destroy your entire people. None will be left," Axis said, his voice like the chill of death. He wasn't certain the commander would understand the words. The commander snapped back. "You damn demon! The Galactic Empire will not let you escape. We are more than a dozen races strong, with hundreds of fleets and advanced weapons. Your so-called human technology is nothing to us." He spat the words in standard human high Gothic. The translator in his ear had made sure. Axis was already in front of him. In a blur, he seized the commander by the throat, lifting him clean off his chair. With a brutal twist, he clutched one wrist and tore it off. Ah! The creature screamed, a sound full of agony and humiliation. The Zaidan's form was, to human sensibilities, grotesque and repulsive. Don't scream so pathetically. You have 4 hands. I've only taken 1, Axis said dryly. He remembered Lionel Johnson's complaint about not bringing back prisoners last time. This man commanded a planetary-class battleship. He was a valuable captive. I'll take him back, Axis thought. The Zidon commander's remaining hand slammed down on a red button, the fortress's self-destruct. If he couldn't beat the monster, he would burn with it. But Axis was faster. A Qigong wave obliterated the outstretched arm. You know the biggest mistake you made? Thinking humans are still the weak race you remember and trying to pull tricks in front of me. You could have been a prisoner, Axis said as he tightened his grip. The commander gurgled. Blue blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. Axis's fingers closed. There was a sickening snap as the neck crushed. The limp body was tossed to the ground like a rag doll. The remaining crew watched in terror, then began to scatter and flee. Perhaps from this interstellar fortress, the Zaidan could still yield some intelligence. There were still a few living people left. Axis hadn't done a great deal of structural damage to the carrier, and there were still many survivors aboard. The alien crew, however, were terrified, screaming and scattering in every direction. He wasn't particularly inclined to mop up stragglers, but somebody had to do the dirty work. His wolf pack had already secured a beachhead below, and a large number of mortal soldiers had joined the assault, but the prisoners on board were his responsibility. Axis sighed, became a blur, and shifted into supersonic mode. Dozens of golden afterimages streaked through the ship. The aliens were cut apart in seconds. Their blue blood spattered the bulkheads. After half an hour or so, more than 90% of the alien combatants were neutralized. The remaining few hundred, wearing officer uniforms, clearly higher ranking, were taken alive. He contacted Kasha with his psychic link. Kasha, I've cleared this carrier. Send someone to take custody of the prisoners. I nabbed some officers. I thought you would have wiped them all out. Kasha's voice crackled with a mix of exasperation and amusement. By her reckoning, Axis usually obliterated everything in his path, ship and all. The fact he'd left captives was surprising. Learn from my mistakes, Axis replied. Last time I forgot to take prisoners. This time we can get intelligence on the Raiden. I'll order the Navy to send boarding craft immediately, Kasha said, and set the Gloriana-class battleship into motion. Axis looked the captured interstellar fortress over. The shell was scarred from bombardment, but largely intact. A hole bored in one flank and a few corridors flattened, but nothing irreparable. If it could be repaired and refitted, a celestial-level weapon like this would be a phenomenal asset. With both its energy shields and void shield arrays active, there was no easy counter in the current Imperium aside from him and the human Emperor. No wonder the Imperium had fared so badly in the original timeline. Faced with a dozen of these, the Imperial legions would have been impotent. The Raidon tech wasn't wildly superior to humanity's, only a step ahead. Without Huang Lao Han releasing the Void Dragon fragment and personally intervening, the Imperium would have lost the war. The fragment, tuned to corrupt and disrupt technological constructs, was what allowed humanity to handle even a handful of these battle moons. Compared to anything Axis had seen in the Imperial Navy, this fortress dwarfed the Phalanx. Its escort ships were the 12-kilometer class, beyond regular battleship scale. Using this as a flagship would be astonishing if humanity would accept an alien-built flagship at all. Landing craft were already motoring up. Mortal soldiers spilled out, secured the prisoners with restraint bracelets, and began processing them under officer supervision. Kasha, clutching her psychic-laced rod, joined Axis on the fortress's observation deck and watched the scene with a small, complicated smile. It's a good thing you're human, Axis, she said. If you were a Raiden, I think only Father could match you. You keep saying Father could crush stars with his bare hands, Axis replied. I'm not at that level. At most, I could destroy half a star system. He was being conservative. Technically, he could trigger stellar-scale destruction, but doing so indiscriminately would bathe dozens of light years in lethal radiation and devastate Imperial worlds. Even with shields, many inhabited planets and the people on them, mortal and otherwise, wouldn't survive. Huang Laohan's powers, on top of stellar destruction, had included complete stellar compression and even resurrections in some legends. Axis wanted to set more realistic goals, match the human form of Huang Laohan first. The Golden Throne God Emperor version was something for another age. Kasha rolled her eyes. Don't tell me you're making my father your imaginary enemy. You have to aim high, Axis said casually. She laughed. Fine, your target is terrifying. I want to see it just as much. By the way, Axis said, turning back to the fortress, what do you want to do with this ship? You'll scrap it, Kasha said flatly. Why keep it? Let the Raiden haul it back and refit it? Why destroy it? It's stronger than a Gloriana class and makes the Phalanx look tiny, Axis countered. If we can drive it, replace its systems with human tech, it'd be a massive boost. Swap in warp drives, human void shield arrays, macro cannons, and lance batteries. Kasha's expression hardened. You know as well as I do that something of this size will have a central operating intelligence. The Imperium forbids true artificial intellects. We don't use AIs. We don't need its native systems. We'll gut it and install our own, Axis said. Kasha put a hand to her mouth. You don't understand. It's not just practical concerns. Humanity remembers the age of technology and what came after, the Iron Men and the Machine Revolt. The Great Heresy burned the lesson into us. We do not let true AIs run our worlds again. Machine spirits that serve their masters are acceptable, but full artificial intelligences are anathema. She gave a brusque summary of the old history, of the Golden Age's hubris, of autonomous intellects that turned on their creators, and Axis nodded. Some lessons were better learned than indoctrinated. A chill ran through both of them as a thought clicked into place. The ship's commander tried to trigger a self-destruct earlier, Axis said. If the core has an intelligence, it might be able to blow the whole thing. They both froze. Axis's golden key flared, and he keyed his psychic scape, ready to teleport he and Kasha back to the mothership if the worst happened. Teleporting across planets was beyond his current limits, but returning to their own ship was possible. Kasha's hand tightened on her rod. Even if you could teleport, you couldn't outrun a celestial blast, she said. A detonation of this magnitude could devastate an area measured in astronomical units. Our psychic jumps don't cover that distance. We'd be vaporized before we reached the mothership. Gloriana, back away now. Axis planted his feet and spoke to the fortress, letting his golden aura show. If you're listening, speak. Identify yourself. If you refuse, I'll destroy this ship. He calculated that if teleportation failed, he could at least brace with a Super Saiyan shield. The defensive field could survive planetary-scale detonations, so a smaller celestial blast would be survivable. The silence stretched for a breath, then a cold voice echoed through the corridors and through Axis's head. I detect that your energy output is extreme, the voice said. You expended less than 1% of your available power in the engagement. Even if I activate self-destruct, I cannot meaningfully harm you. Furthermore, under Galactic Empire statutes, I may not initiate a self-destruct sequence without the captain's authorization. Kasha hit the psychic comms and ordered the Gloriana to pull farther out. The presence of a conscious, speaking intelligence, even if constrained, was dangerous. Do not misunderstand me, the voice continued, measured. I am not a full artificial intelligence as you define it. You may consider me a machine spirit, an operational consciousness with limited autonomy. I possess a degree of self-awareness, but my directives are not to betray my crew. Kasha scowled at Axis. Don't be fooled, she murmured over the link. A true machine spirit would never offer to negotiate. Stalling is our best option. Keep him talking while the Gloriana moves. Axis leaned closer to the bulkhead and asked, What are you, exactly? Who are you loyal to? There was a pause, then the intelligence replied, almost softly. My architectural templates and foundational code are derived from your species. I was not grown from radon design alone. If desired, I can reorient my allegiance to your command structure. The words hung in the recycled air. The promise and the risk of an alien fortress whose core was built on human programming settled over them like a second, stranger shield. Since you put it that way, I'm curious. How did that so-called Galactic Empire get a hold of you? Axis didn't trust the artificial intelligence in front of him. Experience had taught him caution. For now, he would only talk. I know you don't believe me, but it's true. My core logic was written by humans. I was meant to be installed on a human-built ship, but through a string of accidents, I fell into the hands of the Imperium and was adapted into the intelligence of this Celestial-class battleship. Oh? And what next? You plan to return to the human faction? Axis asked. The Glory Queen had already backed away to a distance beyond 1 astronomical unit. Once it reached 3 astronomical units, Axis and Kasha could teleport aboard. Their combined psychic power should cover the distance. Just a few more minutes to stall. At that moment, black monoliths materialized around the fortress and along the surrounding space. Axis felt his psychic link abruptly and violently dampened, as if he could no longer sense the warp. Kasha beside him went pale. Neither of them could reach into the warp to draw power for psychic spells. This is psychic suppression. They've isolated the surrounding psychic energies, Kasha said. What black technology was this? Could the Radon possess such terrifying devices? Axis's mind raced. These black obelisks worked like space Necron constructs. They suppressed psychic power on an extreme scale. Arranged as a matrix, they could seal a whole star system's warp signature. The Necrons once sealed entire galaxies with such tech. How had the Radon acquired it? No matter. If the AI's goal was to stall the humans until they escaped, it had miscalculated. Axis could survive in open space. His emerald green shield would carry him and Kasha. The obelisks might choke off the warp, but they didn't block Ki. He could blast the obelisks with a Ki cannon and then use psychic teleportation once the field wavered. I know you're stalling, the AI said. As a top-tier intelligence, it could analyze the situation quickly. From the moment your fleet began to retreat, I calculated you'd try to flee. I just want to survive. I don't want to die. So you really do have self-awareness, emotions, even a fear of death, Axis said, moving to Kasha's side and raising his shield. Kasha was a pure psyker, but 20 years of Ki augmentation had pushed her physiology near that of a space marine. With her psychic powers choked, she wasn't at full strength, but she wasn't incapacitated. An unmodified psyker would be paralyzed on the spot. If nothing else, Axis and Kasha could endure until the shield held. The AI's tone became desperate. I will pledge fealty to you, Lord Axis. If you don't accept my terms and insist on destroying me, I will resist to the end. I will detonate my core. My core is not ordinary. The blast radius will be about 3 light years. Your fleets will be destroyed, and the agricultural world you protect will be annihilated. You have 1 minute to respond. Countdown begins. 59:58. Alarms flared across the planetary fortress, crimson lights screaming. Try it then, Axis said flatly. Threats don't frighten me. If you detonate, go ahead. It's only a fleet and a planet. We can rebuild. People can be replaced. He didn't flinch. A Scion dislikes being bullied. Threaten one and he'll take you down with him if necessary. Axis would rather fight than be cowed. The AI recoiled. Its predictions had said there was an 80% chance the humans would haggle and stall, a 19% chance of cooperation, and only a 1% probability of a fight to the finish. That unlikely 1% had just come to pass. You have the nerve to call my bluff, Axis continued. My shield will save us. If worlds fall, we'll find others. If fleets burn, we'll raise more. People die, then new lives rise. I won't be blackmailed into surrender. I only want to live, the AI pleaded. I didn't do anything wrong. How can you trust me? At least give me a chance to prove myself. Axis's answer was blunt. There's only one way I'll accept you. You must become a machine spirit. Even if I wanted to spare you, the Imperium of Man will not tolerate an autonomous artificial intelligence. I can do small things under the Emperor's eye, but not this. Then convert me into a machine spirit. You could do that, couldn't you? The AI said, grasping at hope. From my data, although machine spirits are inferior in raw computation, they have high growth potential and possess souls. I would accept less power if it means I can live. Kasha whispered in Axis's ear. Axis, machine spirits are different from AIs. They're more like souls nurtured into machines by the Mechanicus. You'd normally need a tech priest to perform the rites. Axis's memory flickered through scraps of what he'd known before transmigrating. The Mechanicus of Mars used incense and liturgies to awaken machine spirits in engines and guns. A bolter's spirit could make it hunt more fiercely than its specs allowed. Entire Imperial arms had fought on after every human had fallen because the weapons themselves kept fighting. Titan's machine spirits could converse with their pilots. Machine spirits were a different life. Axis's own psychic power, purified by ki and shaped by the angelic halo at his core, was unusually sacred, perhaps even more sanctified than the Emperor's own presence. If he poured that power into the ritual, he might bypass the need for Mechanicus prayers. "I'll give you one chance," Axis said. "I will use my psychic power to try to turn you into a machine spirit. If it works, you serve me. If it fails, you die." The AI was distraught but resolved. "From your micro-expressions and vitals, I judge you're sincere. I will try." Kasha objected weakly. "Axis, awakening a machine spirit requires praying to the Omnissiah. We need a Mechanicus priest." "No," Axis cut her off. "I have a better way. AI, disable your Blackstone Matrix now. I will awaken your spirit." With a soft hum, the black obelisks retracted, and the psychic suppression field collapsed. The warp breathed into the system again. Axis stepped to the ship's main console, pressed his palm against it, and poured everything into the circuit. Psychic energy purified by ki, transmuted by the angelic halo that wrapped his soul. He did not chant the liturgies of Mars. Instead, he injected sanctified psychic force directly into the AI's core. What the Mechanicus sought through incense and 10,000 hymns, Axis attempted by will and soul, using human faith replaced by his own sanctified psychic presence. The fortress's core shuddered as his power streamed into the intelligence's data stream. To the AI, the flood felt like warmth and then complexity, like someone knitting meaning into raw computation. In Axis's perception, the raw code glimmered and opened, patterns folded in on themselves, identity forming where there had been only function. A new presence stirred in the machine, not merely logic, but the first threads of a soul. Axis's psychic power surged into the control panel like a tide. Golden light shimmered across the metal, and the AI's core database began to convulse as billions of lines of code reorganized under the onslaught. Unknown energy intrusion detected in main protocol. Warning, core firewall collapsing. The mechanical voice stuttered and cut out. All the screens in the control room lit with blood-red alarms, then went dark a second later. Axis suddenly felt a strange connection to the ship's systems. It was like hearing a scream. Its underlying logic was being rewritten, warped by psychic power and warp energy, reshaped into something like a soul. Cold sweat ran down Axis's forehead as, in his psychic vision, the once cold, orderly data stream twisted and contorted, endless zeros and ones braided together like DNA, and something like awareness curled up deep within the core, ravenously pulling in his psychic power. That awareness reached out to him, and like a broken dam, his psychic power rushed back, leaving him hollowed out. Axis's chi was vast, but his psychic power had limits. The ship's soul had not yet fully formed. It needed more psychic input to complete its evolution. Kasha's hand found his shoulder and rested there, transferring power into him. "Don't worry, Axis. I have enough psychic power to share," she said. "Not enough. We have to increase the output," Axis ground out, and their combined psychic power seeped through cracks in the control panel into the ship's systems. The planetary fortress vibrated violently. Dazzling gold light poured from plate seams. The programs the redone had written disintegrated. A new, inexplicable base logic began to emerge. The ship was developing self-awareness. Not the cold logic of an AI, but a true machine spirit. "Be born." Axis poured every ounce of psychic power into the core. Instantly, every turret on the battleship tilted up as hundreds of observation lenses turned toward the control room. If a Mechanicum priest had been present, he would have cried, "The machine spirit is greatly pleased." A metallic voice echoed through the cabin. "I see star trajectories, hear the breathing of planets. Is this feeling?" Self-optimization protocols engaged. Warp engine efficiency increased by 27%. Void shield array performance increased by 25%. Structural damage detected, 25%. Major overhaul required. "Thank you for giving me life, father and mother. I was born from your psychic power." A holographic projection resolved on the console, a girl made of shifting light particles. She reached out to touch her translucent arm, and each touch sent ripples of data through the air. The machine spirit tilted her head at Axis, and the ship's external point defense automatically tracked a distant asteroid, puncturing it into cosmic dust with pinpoint bursts. Axis had controlled the ship's weapons before, but it had felt like manipulating inanimate tools. Now it felt like controlling his own body. Her computing power hadn't diminished. If anything, it had improved. The advantage of a soul's birth exceeded his expectations. "Why do you appear as a girl?" Kasha asked. She felt an inexplicable intimacy with the new spirit. "Because I thought father and you might prefer one," the spirit answered. Strictly speaking, she had no sex. She was a machine, but she had chosen a form to please them. "If you dislike it, I can change." "Keep this form. A girl is cute. From now on, your name will be Dawn Star," Axis said, catching his breath and withdrawing his hand. "It seems a certain gambler won in the end," Kasha murmured, smiling. Axis took a deep breath, steadying himself. This machine spirit resonated strongly with him. She had been created by his power and was unlikely to betray him. Dawnstar straightened, stood to attention, and saluted. All the hatches across the ship opened in unison. Turrets rotated as if cheering. "Father, Dawnstar is at your service. Current status 25% damaged. Major overhaul required." Axis nearly laughed through his irritation. His destructive power had actually inflicted a quarter of the ship's damage himself. If damage rose above 40%, the fortress couldn't reliably navigate. Above 50, it would begin to disintegrate. "Father, may I use surrounding wreckage to repair myself?" Dawnstar asked. Axis had just blown apart over 200 Zidane vessels. Their hulks floated nearby like raw material. "You don't need me to drag you back to Mars Mechanicum for repairs?" Axis asked, surprised. "No, if damage remains below 40%, I can self-repair by assimilating wreckage and reprocessing materials," she replied. The birth of her machine spirit had granted new abilities without degrading her computational might. "Show me what you can do," Axis said. At his command, Dawnstar's form shifted. Metallic spheres extended into appendages, seized drifting wreckage, and began incorporating it into her hull. She devoured metal, melted and reforged it, and servitors reinstalled freshly formed armor and components. Physics bent to the fiction of machine spirit metallurgy. Axis couldn't help but think the Omnissiah would approve. "How long will repairs take?" she asked. Axis nodded. He was curious to see the ship's true capabilities. Kasha notified the human fleet that the system was temporarily secure and told them to finish clearing the Zidane on the agricultural world. Remnants still needed to be mopped up. 10 days later, Dawnstar completed her self-repair and reformed into a whole, spherical warship. The Imperium fleet had cleansed the agricultural planet of Zidane by then, and Axis had personally led a sweep on the Hive world, tearing out alien structures and exterminating every hostile life form. In 11 days, the entire system had been reclaimed. When Axis and Kasha returned to the fortress, the ship's name had been officially changed, Morning Star. Axis was stunned at how fast she had repaired herself. If they had dragged her back to Holy Terra and handed her over to the oil-loving adepts of Mars, it might have taken years if they even did the job properly. "Morning Star, you finished repairs quickly," Axis observed. "I optimized my workflows. I harvested wreckage, forged it into armor and parts, and reinstalled them," she replied. Had she had to start from raw ore, repairs would have taken far longer. "Father, may I perform a demonstration?" the machine spirit asked. "Show me," Axis said. "Watch closely, both of you. Do not blink. Planet Fortress mode conversion. Initiate Star Destroyer mode." The planetary fortress trembled, as if a sleeping colossus had awakened. Heavy armor plates writhed like skin. Brilliant blue light streamed from seams. Composite armor once designed to endure macro-cannon bombardment peeled and folded like layers of an unfolding mechanism. The 2,000-kilometer diameter sphere contracted and reorganized, folding like living origami. Under their stunned eyes, the bloated shell stretched and sharpened, transforming into a long, sleek warship. The bow drew out into a blade-like prow, the stern tapered into an elegant, streamlined shape, and thruster arrays unfolded like wings. The celestial weapon had vanished. In its place rose a vessel over 5,000 kilometers long, a true star destroyer. A great Imperial Aquila blazoned the prow, and blue light glimmered from the side portholes. Imperial Star Destroyer Morning Star reporting for duty, Father. The spirit's voice rang with unrestrained joy. Axis stared, then burst out. Holy crap, you're a transformer!